Wednesday left the weather vane, the bell over the door giving a sharp, crisp ring behind her as if marking the final note of her cold judgment. Vic looked hollowed out, every color leached from him. He stumbled a few steps and then collapsed back into the booth, curling up and clutching his head with both hands, gasping as if he were drowning. He couldn't answer Wednesday's words. They had cut through him like a scalpel dipped in ice, stripping away his masks and finding the place he had done everything to hide, the raw terror that began in a childhood laboratory, the thing he had tried to smother with madness, noise, and endless chocolate. Vic. Enid's chest ached for him. She stepped forward and wrapped him in a tight hug. She had never seen him like this, without his flamboyant lunacy and exaggerated grin, fragile as glass, tremulous and thin. Vic, what you two were just talking about. Dismembered and sewn back together. What did that mean? Her voice shook. Her eyes were full of fear and confusion. No, please, don't ask, don't. Vic's reply was muffled against her shoulder, a broken sob. He sounded like a wounded animal caught in a trap, only able to emit a mournful cry while shrinking into her embrace, trying to draw warmth from her, to ward off a chill that seemed to come from his bones. Enid's heart clenched when she looked up and saw huge white eyes peeking over Vic's shoulder. There was no hunger or mischief in Venom's gaze now, only a heavy, almost sorrowful calm. It extended a pitch-black, viscous tentacle and tapped Enid extremely lightly on the temple. Watch, girl. Venom's deep voice echoed directly in her mind. See what he has been fighting all this time. Boom. In an instant, a wash of memories, dense and suffocating, slammed into Enid's head. She was ripped into a pale, antiseptic world that smelled of disinfectant. Her viewpoint shrank to the size of a child's. He was a small boy pinned to a cold operating table, a glareless lamp stinging his eyes. People in white coats with plague doctor masks stood around him, their glass goggles reflecting him like an object. A scalpel flashed. He screamed, "Ah, please, it hurts! Mama, Mama!" His voice tore up in the empty lab. No one answered, only the metallic clink of instruments. Once, twice, 10 times, 100. The same table, the same cold blade, the same weakening shrieks. Fear turned to numbness, screams dwindled to silent tears, and then even the tears dried. Those eyes that had been full of terror hollowed out until, from that hollowness, something strange and twisted began to grow. Later, he began to lash out with the nastiest words he could find to provoke the doctors, until his lips were roughly sewn shut. The scene snapped again. Enid found herself in the body of the older Vic, holding Wednesday's hand, spinning and dancing in a clearing strewn with body parts and the copper tang of blood. An ecstatic, almost deranged grin bloomed on his face. He laughed, delighted. Great, we can play again. This time I must find their hive. I'll dig out all the chocolates and eat them. But beneath that mad joy, Enid could feel the true thing boiling under Vic's bravado, a tidal wave of bone-deep fear. Memories of the lab kept surfacing. The terror of those doctors returning lurked behind every grin. That fear was so enormous, it felt like it would burst his heart. He poured ecstasy over his panic like paint on a cracked wall. His waltz of madness was a desperate mask for the panic it hid. The scene shifted once more to Venom's perspective. At night, Vic slept, but his mind was not at rest. Ink-black waves of fear rolled through his consciousness. Venom, a vast black presence, drifted in that ocean of dread. It did nothing but stay with him, enduring the tremors and nightmares that rose from the deepest parts of its host. It consumed his fear as it consumed chocolate, but the taste was bitter. Since the Harvest Festival, the waves had become rougher, more violent. Venom's tentacle withdrew. Enid snapped back to the present, pale as paper, trembling so hard her tears burst free like a broken dam. She finally understood. His clownish madness, the constant noise, the chocolate obsession, everything had been a battlement against something worse. She tightened her arms around the still quivering Vic, as if her body heat could thaw the cold lodged in his soul. "I'm sorry. Vic, I'm sorry," she choked, the words tumbling out incoherently. "I shouldn't have asked. I didn't know. I didn't know." At last she understood the hell behind his brilliant smile. Her hands patted his back awkwardly, but with instinctive tenderness. She could not banish the terror rooted so deep inside him, but she could press herself against it, again and again, a little human warmth for him to hide behind. Slowly, very slowly, Vic's tense body loosened. The violent shaking eased into a faint, barely perceptible tremor in his breath, like ripples left on water after a storm. He kept his face buried in her shoulder, as if that were the only shelter he had from the world. After a long time, he spoke in a muffled, gravelly voice, nasal from crying. "I'm sorry." The apology was feather-light and yet heavy enough to hurt Enid. "What are you sorry for?" she snapped, sounding like a person who had been crying but had to be strong now. "The ones who should be sorry are those bad people, not you." Vic was quiet for a moment before replying in a low voice edged with self-loathing. "I'm sorry for letting you see this awful side of me." He paused, forcing the words out, like a useless, terrified coward. "You're not," Enid said immediately. She cupped his face and made him look at her with her red, swollen but resolute eyes. "Victor Black is the bravest person I've ever met." Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried iron. "You went through horrible things, and you didn't become what they wanted. You didn't turn cold or hateful. You still laugh. You still make noise. You still find ways to protect people." Her fingertips brushed his wet cheeks. Her voice grew soft but steady. "You're fighting in your own way. That's not awful. It's amazing." Vic stared at her like someone emerging from a fog. The wild light that usually danced in his eyes was now washed clear, leaving confusion and a carefully guarded warmth. He seemed to be searching her steady gaze for a way to piece himself back together. Finally, very slowly, he leaned his forehead against hers, a silent plea for support. "Really?" he asked, fragile and hopeful. "Really?" Enid nodded hard and bumped her forehead to his. "Truer than chocolate." A tiny, nearly invisible curve tugged at one corner of Vic's mouth, the first crack in a gray sky. Enid's clumsy, sincere words kindled a small spark in his cold chest. It was small and fragile, easily swamped by the dark tides of memory, but it was real, a sliver of light cutting through years of fear. He drew a breath that no longer trembled. It smelled of the cafe, warm and sweet. He pushed himself up, his posture straightening, and the old, flamboyant energy returned to his movements. This time the smile felt rooted in something true, not just a mask. "All right," he declared, his voice regaining its usual theatrical boom, but laced now with quiet resolve. "Wallowing in self-pity isn't going to fix anything, right, Venom?" Venom popped out of his collar, its huge white eyes flicking to him. The tone was still sardonic, but gentler. Finally saying something decent. "But if you make that scent of fear again, I'll go partner with that goth girl. At least she's emotionally stable." Vic laughed, a bright, genuine sound. He reached up and ruffled Enid's hair. "Thanks, Enid. I'll accept your amazing certification." He turned his gaze out the window toward the dense trees of Nevermore Academy. The smile slipped into something sharper, focused. He cracked his knuckles, light in tone but firm in purpose. "Now then," he said, "time to provide some logistical support for our captain." He winked, the old mad sparkle returning, but tempered by resolve. "A good Watson doesn't get fired that easily, right?" 42. Fear Echo. The forest shadows were as thick as ink. Wednesday walked through them, thing wriggling uneasily on her shoulder, tapping out quick messages against her skin. "Isn't this a bit much? That boy looks like he's about to break," the hand warned. Wednesday's lips were a cold, straight line. She didn't slow. "If I don't do this, that idiot will stick to me like unshakable gum," she said, her voice bright and hard in the quiet woods. "If we run into the bird beak and he sees it, it will shatter him completely. That would be crueler than any words." She felt a spike of irritation she could not quite name. That idiot, did he really think she didn't know? Late that night after the Harvest Festival, she had stood at Vic's cramped bed, the bed right next to the bathroom door, watching him sleep. Moonlight from the high window lay across his face. The grin she'd seen so often, the manic little smile, had been replaced by something close to pure terror. His brow was knotted, his lips quivering. He looked like a child in a nightmare, curling in on himself for a security that wasn't there. At the party, she'd watched him laugh and shout and drink cheap beer by the glass, as if drowning himself in noise. But beneath the exaggerated smile and the restless eyes, she could see something else. Raw, primal fear filling him to the brim, on the verge of breaking through. Still, he had said nothing. Even terrified to the point of shattering, He'd tried to get close to her in that clumsy, testing way, as if protecting her. It was ridiculous. She had to fix this herself. She wanted him to see, with his own eyes, that the things hiding in the shadows were nothing to be afraid of. This time, it would be her turn to face them. Following the map Tyler had given her, Wednesday found the forgotten ruins. The Joseph Crackstone meeting house was nothing more than a rough stone foundation swamped with moss and rotten leaves, and a few low, charred walls bowed and splintered. The air smelled of old ash and damp earth, a quiet record of a fire that had destroyed the place long ago. She chased off a pair of vagrants who'd been using the site and began a careful search. Her fingertips skimmed cold, rough stones. She tried to reach out psychically, but the echoes of the past were faint and cluttered, until her hand hit a charred fragment of a doorframe half buried in the dirt. A ripping, familiar sensation seized her. The world fractured like a smashed mirror and snapped back together. She was suddenly standing in a different clearing. Afternoon sun filtered through leaves. Where rubble had been, the meeting house now stood whole and smelling of fresh pine. At the doorway, a scene drew her eyes. A young girl being shoved roughly inside. Her clothes were old-fashioned, but the face, pale, dark-eyed, cool, looked almost identical to Wednesday's own. From the crowd around the building came a soft gasp. Goody Addams! Was she an ancestor, 4 centuries back? Then Joseph Crackstone himself appeared, the pilgrim from the prophetic painting, calmly holding a torch. Without hesitation, he threw the flame up onto the roof. The dry timber caught fast. Fire leapt hungrily and swallowed the building. Screams and frantic banging rose from inside. Many people like her were locked in, bound in chains, desperate and trapped. In the chaos, she saw Goody, not yet fully restrained, shoved by fellow prisoners into a hidden trapdoor in the floor. The flames rose, and the screams pierced the air. Goody became the only survivor of that massacre against those like them. The vision twisted again. Wednesday stood in a quiet meadow. Goody Addams looked at her with urgency and fear. He is coming. He will not stop until he has exterminated us all. Wednesday whirled. Crackstone was there, staff in hand, his face a mask of inhuman calm. His eyes were hollow. There was no hatred, no anger, not even a ripple of feeling. He looked at them with locked focus. You cannot escape, he said, his voice flat as a law of physics. For the first time, a true fear gripped Wednesday. A cold, viscous chill crawled up her spine and settled into her bones. This wasn't the theatrical, aesthetic death she had admired. This was something else, an absolute malice stripped of personhood, as if the act of killing were an automatic, unquestionable procedure, part of a machine. Crackstone did not seem like a man anymore, but like a merciless gear in a monstrous mechanism, driven even after death by an unrelenting mandate to exterminate. The vision snapped away. Wednesday jerked her hand back and stumbled forward. Her knees hit the cold, damp ground. She braced with both hands and gasped for air, nausea clawing at her stomach. She felt awful, hollowed out. So that was what Vic had been facing. This thing. This pure, primal will to destroy, stripped of reason and mercy. Having felt it directly, she finally understood the kind of suffocating terror he had been battling. Not a Gothic flourish, but a mathematical certainty of annihilation. Vic had been fighting that formula with madness every day. She felt the sting of shame. How arrogant and cruel her earlier words to Vic had been, attacking him with his deepest wound, calling him emotional and unstable. She had, in essence, done to him with words what the lab had done with instruments, a precise, surgical tearing that left no room for healing. A tiny, sharp shard of regret found its way into Wednesday Addams' heart. She rose slowly, brushed dirt from her black skirt. Her pale face betrayed nothing, but in those deep, bottomless eyes complicated currents moved. It seems, she whispered, voice rough, I owe him an apology. The silence of the forest was shattered by the crisp snap of a dry branch. Wednesday's breath froze. Her body felt rooted to the spot, as if turned to ice. Only her heart thudded wildly against her ribs, a dull, rapid drumbeat that filled her ears. She tilted her head and pressed her eye to a crack in the weathered boards. The cold wood bit against her brow. What was outside? Those men in the plague masks? Or Joseph Crackstone, whose stare felt as pitiless as a law of physics? A hot, strange emotion seized her. She found herself, for the first time, actually wishing Victor Black's loud, impossible presence were by her side. The thought produced a bitter wave of self-hatred that rose in her throat like bile. Cowardice. She cursed herself quietly. She had promised to be the one who would free him from fear, and now she longed for the very person she'd pushed away to be her shield. Absurd. Ridiculous. The dim light outside the crack shifted. A massive, lidless, bloodshot eye suddenly pressed against the gap, filling it and colliding with her gaze. It was him, the monster that had stalked the forest the night of the Harvest Festival. Unexpectedly, Wednesday's taut nerves loosened for a heartbeat. A nearly absurd sense of relief replaced her terror. Compared to those unknown, cold, despair-making plague doctors and Creston, who felt like the inexorable pull of fate, the monster before her, bloody, savage, seemed simple, direct, even familiar. Her reason slammed the comparison down. Just because Vic and Venom could play with it like a toy didn't mean she could. Evacuate, she decided in an instant. She lowered her center of gravity, muscles coiling to launch her toward the trees. A dull whimper, threaded with grievance, rolled out of the monster's throat. Then a voice she had not expected to hear here, lazy and amused, spoke. "Hey, sweetie, peeking isn't a very good habit." Wednesday froze mid-motion. A moment later, with the crackling crash of splintering wood, the low wall in front of her was smashed open. Wood chips flew as dust filled the air. When the haze cleared, the scene came into focus. Venom's massive, hideous black form towered in the clearing, one huge hand wrapped around the monster's throat, lifting it like a rag doll. The creature kicked, muffling its cries. Vic! Wednesday's name slipped out before she knew it, urgent in a way she'd never felt. The corner of her mouth twitched into a tiny, almost imperceptible smile, so quick it might have been imagined. "Miss Wednesday Addams," Vic said, his voice low and gravelly, threaded with Venom's roar, mock accusatory. "Firing your Watson and withholding his wages, not something a respectable employer should do, is it?" He turned his head to eye the struggling beast, researcher's curiosity lighting his face. Hyde, right? Such a classically tragic name. He leaned in. Despite the monster's suffocating contortion, Vic smiled. "I'm hungry enough to swallow a dessert like you whole, but before dessert I usually prefer a main course." His tone dropped to a clear threat. "So tell me, who let you out of your cage, or those bastards in the plague masks? Where is their lair?" Venom obediently opened its bloody maw. Thick saliva hissed onto the ground, then its long, forked tongue licking across jagged teeth. "It's fine if you don't talk," it rumbled. "I don't mind, changing the order of the courses." Then, bang! A gunshot cracked through the trees. Vic moved so fast he left only an afterimage. He used the massive hide as a meat shield, pivoting it between himself and the shooter. The bullet slammed into the monster's thick shoulder blade, and blood spurted. The beast gave a strangled, agonized roar. "So noisy," Venom grumbled. Its other hand snatched a lump of wet mud and rotten leaves and shoved it into Hyde's mouth, mashing it shut and preventing it from roaring again or spitting anything out. Half of Vic's face peered past the struggling creature toward the direction of the shot, his expression exaggerated surprise and mockery. "Whoa, seriously? Again?" he drawled, disdain dripping from the words. "The same trick on the same person, twice? Has your creative department gone on vacation, Mr. Plague Doctor? Or is your budget only enough to buy the introductory guide for villains?" Clap, 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 slow, polite applause echoed from the deepest shadows. A figure in the signature plague mask stepped forward with unhurried grace, as if attending a banquet. "Oh, look at you," the voice came through the mask, metallic and buzzing. "C-136, C-137, long time no see. You really are difficult to archive." Vic rolled his eyes theatrically, not even fully stepping out from behind Hyde. "Slow clapping? Stepping out of the darkness? Really?" he sneered. "That outdated villain entrance routine died with third-rate B-movies. What century was your script dug up from?" The plague doctor did not seem offended. The eyes behind the beaked mask seemed almost amused. "Is that so? That's a shame." He shrugged with mock regret. "Personally, I enjoy a classic entrance." He tilted his beak toward Vic, as if sniffing. "The last few times I observed you, my instruments could pick up the rich, mellow aroma of fear rolling off you for miles. But now—" He paused, genuine curiosity creeping into his voice. "I can hardly smell it anymore. Are you no longer afraid, C-136? Vic burst into a manic laugh, his hand white around Hyde's neck. "Afraid? Of course I'm afraid. Can't you see my hand trembling with fear?" He let the laughter die, and his tone shifted, flippant and dangerous. "You know, before coming here, a Da Vinci with prophetic dreams showed me a painting of what I'd look like strapped to your operating table someday, covered in tubes like a circuit board. I was so scared, I almost wet myself." He cocked his head as if in serious thought. Venom's large white eyes blinked. Then the corners of Vic's mouth pulled into a grin that was almost religious in its fury. But on second thought, a destructive hunger flared in his gaze. "If that blind old hag, Lady Luck, is going to toss me back onto your chopping block." His voice fell, determined and defiant. "Then before that happens, I'm going to turn your kitchen upside down, set all the ingredients loose, and smash your precious instruments to pieces." Venom opened its enormous maw in agreement, bone-white teeth flashing and thick saliva dripping. "That's right," it growled, greedy and eager. "If we bite, we'll bite off the biggest, fattest piece. Terminator? Terminator." The plague doctor stood like a courteous gentleman. The gaze behind his mask held a faint, almost regretful note. Through the filter, his voice had a metallic, grinding politeness. "You don't need to be so aggressive. See, well, I'll call you Vic. That's what they call you. It's more polite, isn't it?" "I've seen the files on you," he continued. "Dr. 62 personally judged you an uncontrollable failure. Frankly, failures are usually of no interest to us." He spread his hands with exaggerated elegance. "You could have stayed peacefully in that ridiculous hotel in Transylvania with that vampire, and everything would have been fine. We don't want to provoke a Dracula unnecessarily." His beaked head tilted toward Vic, a chill of genuine confusion entering his tone. "But why did you come out? Why did you have to step into our sight and remind us you exist? You're like a defective product that should have been discarded, jumping back onto the quality control bench of its own accord." Vic's smile split his face into something grotesque. "Oh, failure?" He tasted the word like something foreign. "That old fossil 062 is still around? Say hello for me. And tell him, by the way, the thread he used to sew my mouth shut back then was pretty shoddy." He traced his lips with a fingertip, as if the stitches were still there, and then stepped forward with Hyde cradled in one hand like a limp rag doll. "Why did I come out?" he barked, laughter sharp and short. The usual manic glint in his eyes flared to a fierce, pure heat. "Because I've had enough." His voice climbed into a raw, cathartic declaration. "Even my adorable godson Dennis, little kid scared because he's not a monster, dared to clench his fists and grow fangs for his little wolf girl. Why can't I? Hide in that hotel and pretend nothing happened. That's the biggest joke of all." Venom let out a low, hungry growl. Its huge white eyes were fixed on the plague doctor while a long tongue licked jagged teeth. Vic jabbed a finger at the doctor, venom-laced contempt pouring from him. "You people," he spat. "You and your labs, your cold needles, your serial numbers, and this damn mask. You're nothing special." "Afraid? Yes, I'm terrified. Terrified enough to drown myself in chocolate every night just to sleep." He practically roared the words, veins standing out at his temples, but his eyes burned brighter and more terrifyingly than before. "That doesn't mean I'll stay on my knees forever, begging you to let me go. And I sure as hell won't stand by while you make the same nightmare for anyone I care about." So, I came out. His voice dropped, hard and bone-deep with determination. Not to jump back onto some bullshit quality control bench. Venom's body swelled as black, muscular tentacles unfurled behind Vic like furious wings, blotting out the sky, but to smash it to pieces. Venom swallowed Vic's face in a flash. Only those burning white eyes remained visible, madness and rage magnified. "Snack time!" it roared. Thick, brutal tentacles surged, flinging the massive Hyde like a heavy bowling ball at the plague doctor. The wind whistled. Hyde's terrified whimpers warped into a high, broken keening as speed dragged them out. Just as the hulking body was about to strike, the plague doctor didn't even step back. He tilted, neat and almost courteous, and Hyde's bulk brushed his spotless mask and white trench coat before thudding to the ground behind him, sending mud and rotting leaves flying. The blow missed, but Venom pressed the advantage without pause. Using the throw's momentum, its enormous form lunged forward at terrifying speed, skimming the ground like a streak of black lightning and leaping straight for the doctor. The fight snapped into a fever pitch. Venom's arms split, multiplying into a dozen hideous tentacles sheathed in hard black keratin. They whipped at the plague doctor from every direction, every strike whistling through the air, stabs for the face, low sweeps for the ankles, encircling flanks, sealing off every avenue of escape. The onslaught was a torrential black rain with no gap to exploit. No human reflex could meet it. And yet, the plague doctor moved as if weightless, or as if he could foresee the next instant. At the last possible moment before each razor edge struck, he slipped free with the smallest, most precise motions. His feet clipped across the ground in a quick cross-step, like a deadly waltz. A sting-like tentacle missed the tip of his beak by a hair. A sweeping limb slid beneath the soles of his shoes. He twisted and spun with paper-like grace and slid out of the net from an impossible angle. His movements had no wasted motion, efficient, exact, unruffled. His white robe stayed immaculate, a brutal contrast to Venom's violent, chaotic fury. "It's useless," the plague doctor said, his voice steady through the storm, metallic and indifferent. "Your attack patterns, muscle activation habits, even your cognitive biases, Dr. 062 logged them all. Remember your battle royale? You performed perfectly." With another ghost-like sidestep, he let a boulder-punishing strike glide past and smash into the earth, leaving deep cracks. "To you, this is a battle," he added. "To me, this is merely data verification." "Shut up!" Venom roared, every blow growing wilder and less coordinated. Tentacles slammed into surroundings like an out-of-control black storm, gouging furrows in the soil and snapping trees clean in half. "Angry so easily?" The plague doctor continued, as if strolling through a garden, white robes fluttering. "Your movements are scattered. Flesh and blood creatures cannot help their base emotions. Truly tragic." He cocked his head, ready to elegantly avoid a basketball-sized rock Venom blindly hurled. "Rocks?" he said with a soft chuckle. "After finally evolving from monkeys to humans, can't you be more creative with your attacks?" Click. A faint, almost drowned sound hit his ears, too subtle for anyone else. The plague doctor's surgical hearing seized it. A tiny mechanical latch had engaged on the side of the rock, just outside his visual cone. His electronic eye pushed its processors to the limit, but it was too late. Boom! The ordinary-looking rock detonated less than 10 centimeters from his head. Flames licked out, thick black smoke boiled up, and a crushing shockwave ripped leaves from the ground in a circular blast. "Is that high level enough for you, Mr. Plague Doctor?" Vic and Venom yelled together over the flames, gloating in their revenge. The fire and smoke subsided. The scene cleared. The plague doctor still stood where he'd been, but his iconic plague mask, with that emblem of medieval horror, lay shattered. One half dangled on a hinge, the other had been blasted away entirely, exposing what sat beneath. Vic and Venom, and even Wednesday, watching from a distance, all saw the same thing. It wasn't half a human face. Beneath the broken mask gleamed a bright silver skull frame, cold and metallic. In one socket, a mechanical electronic eye pulsed an unstable crimson. Sparks spat from the break. A thin curl of black smoke rose. This was neither human nor any known supernatural. The air seemed to freeze. Venom's huge white eyes bulged. Its maw hung open in a soundless gap. Shock condensed into one guttural cry that ripped through the forest. "Motherfucker, the Terminator?" 45. Hollywood's victory. "I told you, you smell like chocolate soaked in engine oil," Venom grinned, his voice a bizarre mix of disgust and excitement. "No, wait. Engine oil soaked in chocolate. Good God, did you steal your look from the Terminator? Did you pay the license fee?" The plague doctor, no, the mechanical doctor, let the muscles on the human half of his face twitch. The pupil in his intact human eye constricted. With terrifyingly steady movements, he lifted his hand and tore the other half of the teetering mask from his face, tossing it into the dirt with a dull thud. Exposed beneath were gleaming metal plates and precise, intricate wiring. Small electrical sparks popped from the fractures with a soft crackle. "An attack outside the established algorithm," he observed. "The occasional illogical whim of flesh and blood creatures does possess unpleasant merits." The filter that once rounded his voice was gone, leaving a metallic rasp. He raised his still human hand and, with a tenderness that looked almost out of place, brushed his fingertips over the exposed metal skull. "Also," he said, turning his human eye to Venom with a chill, "do not lump me with those crudely made mechanical curiosities from fiction. It is an insult to precision engineering. How rare, a cold voice said. Wednesday stepped out slowly, the hem of her black skirt whispering over broken branches and dead leaves. Expressionless and pale, she fixed those deep, dark eyes on the half-human, half-mechanical face before her. From your attempt at human cadence, I detect a trace of genuine anger, she said, head tilted, mocking curiosity in her tone. What? Having your lack of original design exposed produced a low-level emotion? Shame, upgraded to rage? Although Wednesday hadn't watched The Terminator, her viewing was strictly limited to black and white horror classics. She still seized the moment with surgical accuracy. Hey, seriously, Venom piped up again, sounding childlike, as if the life and death struggle from moments ago were only a detour. Can you transform? Like clink, and your finger turns into a gun barrel? Or a chainsaw pops out of your arm? That's how it goes in the movies. A laugh came from inside Venom. Vic's laugh, hearty and sharp. How could he? Stupid Venom. Those iron guys in movies always show up butt naked and then steal other people's clothes and weapons. They can't transform. They're dirt poor. The corner of the mechanical doctor's human eye twitched. His exposed metal jaw clicked. His crimson electronic eye flashed, as if processing an absurd signal. My design intent, he said at last, the metallic grind of his voice thickening, does not include such useless, energy-wasting, slapstick functions. Oh, Vic and Venom drooped in unison. How boring, Vic summarized. Venom nodded. Agreed. Not even a decent special effect. C-136, the mechanical doctor said slowly, the human half of his mouth twisting into a cold arc. I was told that the old fool Dr. 062 personally used the thickest catgut to sew that nonstop chatter of yours shut at the operating table. A cruel little light flashed in his human eye, probably the best decision he ever made. A pity it didn't stick. Before anyone could respond, the mechanical doctor's still human hand rose and produced an object. It was a cylindrical alloy hilt, minimalist, clinical, a chill of technology about it. Set into its top sat a perfectly cut ruby, dark and blood-like in the dim forest, catching and refracting an ominous light. Venom. Vic's voice held an odd hesitation. Why does that thing feel familiar? Like déjà vu from some far-off corner of the galaxy. Venom's huge white eyes narrowed as he tried to place it. Yeah, me too. Looks like something some old movie guy dreamed up to rip people off. Before Venom finished, a low, intimidating hum filled the air. With a sudden whoom, a blazing beam of light erupted from one end of the hilt. It wasn't a perfect, clinical column. Its core was as bright as a small star, while the edges flickered and blurred from raw energy overflow, throwing off heat waves in a halo that warped the air. The blade threw hellish light across the mechanical doctor's half-mechanical face. Holy crap, a lightsaber! Vic and Venom shouted at the same time, their voices rustling the leaves. Venom cocked his head at the doctor, a look of incredulous disdain on his massive face. No way. Did your lab spend all its budget buying copyrights? First you rip off the Terminator, now you're doing Star Wars? Does Lucasfilm know you're playing with this? Consider this a cease and desist, brother. Shut up! The mechanical doctor exploded like a powder keg. The human side of his face flushed. A sizzling processor overload noise came from the exposed metal beneath his skin. His crimson eye flared wildly. For the first time, his voice lost all composure and became a high, hysterical metallic shriek. This is a dam, he shouted. It's a device I designed myself. I invented it before your stupid, unscientific movies ever existed. Do you understand? It was me. Before that damn hippie George Lucas ever put his childish space opera on a screen. I invented it. You idiots, poisoned by pop culture, physics, engineering. Those are the truths, not that Hollywood pile of nonsense. He snapped. All pretense of elegant maneuvering was gone. He gripped the hilt with both hands, the blade sizzling with raw heat and energy, raised it high, and charged at Venom with a primitive, violent roar. The blazing blade tore through the air, carrying a momentum that promised destruction as it came down in a savage arc. 46. Collapse and protection. Vic and Venom kept up their taunts, but beneath the banter, their alertness was absolute. The mechanical doctor's attacks were surgical. His evasions and strikes moved with the cold calculation of a machine that had run 1,000 simulations. Every sweep of that scorching blade cut with destructive heat. The hiss it made through the air raised the hairs on their necks. This time, the blade targeted Venom. The hot steel sliced through the symbiote as if it were butter. The torn edges steamed and reeked of burnt protein as they struggled to reseal. Venom, switch! The heat's killing you, Vic sent urgently. Switch now! Has your brain finally been filled with chocolate sauce? Venom roared, working to regenerate the rents. Listen, I have a plan. What if we like this? Vic flashed the idea through their shared link. Sounds good, but I'm worried you'll be turned into a mince, lean meat, fatty meat, cartilage. Venom snarled, jerking back to narrowly avoid a sweep aimed for its head. Better than you being dumpling filling right now. Stop whining. Any later and you really will be gone. 3, 2, 1. Vic finished the countdown. Don't blame me if you die, Venom grumbled, but he trusted Vic anyway. The mechanical doctor's blade arced toward Venom's neck. Venom's massive black form collapsed inward like a receding tide and vanished, retracting completely into Vic. The blade cut through empty air. The scorching edge grazed Vic's nose. The heat singed his cheek. At almost the same instant, the mechanical doctor, predicting within human speed, stepped back half a pace to avoid Vic's sudden lunge at the ruined half of his face. Although I don't know what you're trying to do, his voice grated metallically, a note of mockery under the words, your intent is too obvious, too short, kid. His intact human eye blinked. No, Vic said, a feral smirk splitting his face. Just perfect. There was a grating, bone-deep cracking as Vic deliberately dislocated his shoulder, elbow and wrist in one motion. His arm extended grotesquely, stretching past normal limits. His fingertips touched the mechanical doctor's exposed, sparking, shattered metal cheek. Venom, your turn, Vic roared through the pain. The hero makes an entrance. Venom's voice erupted from Vic's fingertips. A thin spear of tar-like black symbiote shot from his fingers and drilled into the exposed gaps of the mechanical doctor's alloy face, slipping inside his skeleton. Damn it! The mechanical doctor retreated a half step. His electronic eye darted. To purposely dislocate arm joints to extend reach. This is ruthless. But the shock only deepened. The symbiote that had invaded him spread like a virus, seeping into seams and crevices, forcing its way into the innards of his body. Black fluid began to leak from the joints and plates of his exterior. My control is being taken. The mechanical doctor's voice carried an expression of genuine astonishment no algorithm of his design could compute. A parasite that cannot survive without a host, how could it possess such capability? Inside the chassis, a silent, brutal struggle erupted. His cool, logical electronic consciousness battling the instinctive, raw will of Venom for dominion over the mechanical shell. Outside, Vic wrenched his dislocated arm back into place and shoved both hands at the mechanical doctor's right hand, where it still clutched the blade, forcing the fingers apart. Good timing, Vic. I'll help, came Venom's voice from the machine's left arm. The fingers of that hand shifted and fused, rearranging themselves into a black, metallic cleaver. Without hesitation, it swung at the elbow joint of the machine's right arm. The mechanical doctor stared, incredulous. My body's control is compromised. It can alter my structure? Remarkable. Biological plasticity. He turned his head sharply, his human eye and the crimson mechanical pupil locked on Vic. For the first time, his voice found a thread of resignation. All right, I admit it, C-136, C-137, you score a point this time. Enjoy your luck. Fine, fine, Vic said, tone casual though every nerve was taut. Now loosen your grip. I really want this toy. Wishful thinking, you uncivilized monkey. The mechanical doctor's smile on his half-human face was especially eerie. Suddenly his red eye began to flicker violently and irregularly. Inside him a shrill alarm began to beep. Beep, beep, beep. Shit! Venom cursed inside Vic. The part of the symbiote still inside the machine recoiled as if shocked and snapped back, withdrawing entirely into Vic in an instant. Vic, run, now! He's a supercharged bomb. He's going to blow. Venom completed their bond in a heartbeat. Pitch-black symbiote enveloped Vic like a second skin, granting him reckless strength and protection. But he didn't use it to attack. He funneled everything into his legs. He launched himself like a black projectile, ignoring the rising, terrible energy thrum behind them, and charged at Wednesday, who had barely had time to react. He hit her with a bone-jarring thud. He knocked her down, collapsing over her. His body covered hers completely, his arms wrapped around her in a desperate, fragile shield. In those instant before the blast, she only had time to take in Vic's face under the symbiote. His usually wide, white eyes were pinched almost shut, pupils blown wide with a terror she'd never seen. He pressed his hands against the sides of her head with everything he had. His knuckles were white, nails digging uselessly as he tried to protect her skull. Then, boom! The explosion detonated with a ferocity that obliterated the world around its center. A sound wave, raw and spherical, radiated outward. Leaves and topsoil were ripped away. Trees were crushed and splintered as if an invisible hand smashed them. The impact struck Wednesday in the head like a red-hot sledgehammer. Pain and concussion ripped through her. Darkness rose like a tide and swallowed her sight. Before she lost consciousness, she saw a few images that would sear themselves into memory. The black symbiote covering Vic, what had promised to be invulnerable, boiling, blistering, and tearing under the sonic force like wax in a furnace. It convulsed without sound, was violently flung off him and cast aside. Vic, stripped of Venom's protection, took the blast with his own flesh. Bright, warm blood poured from his ear and ran down, winding onto her cheek, hot and unmistakable against her skin. His hands never stopped pressing at her head. Then everything went silent. The world closed to black. Prioritizing romance over friendship. What argument are you making? It felt as if his mind had been plunged into ice water and then yanked back to the surface. Victor snapped awake from a blank, disorienting moment. His ears buzzed and a dull headache throbbed, but his first thought wasn't about himself. He looked down at the silent figure he'd been shielding beneath him. Wed, he tried to call, his chest tight, but the sound died. He couldn't hear his own voice. Instinctively, he pressed his fingers to his ears and felt something wet, sticky, and warm. When he pulled his hand back, a streak of bright red stained his fingertips. My eardrums, he muttered, frowning, then tried to push the worry away. Minor problem. As long as Venom's here, I'll be fine. He propped himself up and checked Wednesday quickly. Her eyes were clamped shut, and her face was pale, but her chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. Relief flooded Victor, and he carefully laid her beside a fallen tree trunk. Then his gaze swept the wreckage, searching for the black symbiote he'd become so used to relying on. There, tangled among the branches of a broken tree, Venom hung like a puddle of lifeless tar, shrunken, barely holding a shape. Found you, Victor breathed. He hurried over and plucked the limp black mass free. Venom twitched faintly in his palm before, with great effort, seeping back into Victor. Victor, you absolute hose before bras bastard! Venom's roar detonated inside his head and made the headache split anew. Oddly, that voice was a comfort. If Venom could swear, things couldn't be completely ruined. Hose before bros? Where's that coming from? Victor answered, bewildered, in the privacy of his mind. Where is it coming from? From that damn explosion. You threw yourself over the little goth girl without even looking at me. I was a rag doll, blown away. Do you know what it's like to be torn apart by sound and flung like a popped balloon? Venom's words were all grievance. Victor felt a sting of guilt. He'd been entirely focused on Wednesday in that instant. He hadn't thought about anything else. I was sent flying and you didn't care? Venom continued, indignant. And what about that lightsaber? That super cool plasma thing we almost got sliced for. Do you even know if it's still there? Venom suddenly remembered a crucial detail and demanded it like a life or death question. Victor shook his head and pointed at the blackened crater where the blast had swallowed everything. I checked. Not even scraps remain. That T-800 self-destructed so completely there wasn't even a hair left. Silence fell. Then a wounded, betrayed tone soaked into Victor's thoughts. Venom's voice went unnaturally calm and heavy as a storm front. So you, Victor Black, first made sure your Wednesday Addams was okay. Then you even remembered to look for that cold but super cool weapon. And finally, you thought to check on your poor, dazed, loyal partner who couldn't even keep his form. Me. You're not just hose before bros. You're a mercenary who abandons friends for profit. I'm hurt, spiritually, very seriously. I'm going to sleep. Time for deep repairs. Don't wake me unless you bring an extra-large chocolate cake as an apology. With the rant concluded, Venom's presence faded as if falling into a deep, sulky slumber. Victor's mind went quiet. Hey, wait! Don't sleep yet, he pleaded silently, half laughing, half crying. Do me one favor. Fix my eardrums. It's a hassle not being able to hear. There was no answer. The buzzing in his head was the only reply. He'd been temporarily abandoned by his other half. Victor rubbed his aching forehead and turned back to the unconscious Wednesday, wondering what to do next. Twilight hung in the sky like coagulated plasma, slow and heavy. Wednesday's eyelids fluttered. The first thing she noticed was warmth, foreign, uncomfortable warmth against her skin. She was in Victor's arms, carried in the old-fashioned bridal style, moving along a secluded path. Her fingers brushed the edge of a cardboard box. A sickly sweet chocolate scent rose from it, incongruous with the smell of smoke and dust. Her first instinct was to escape the humiliating embrace, but a wave of dizziness and weakness robbed her of the effort. "Don't move," Victor's voice thundered from above, steady but too loud, as if he were shouting in a cathedral. He couldn't hear his own volume. "You absorb the sonic blast. Your nervous system needs at least a night's rest to regroup." Wednesday arched an eyebrow and let her tongue be sharp. "So carry the wounded on a strenuous trek is your emergency evacuation protocol?" She expected a snappy comeback. None came, only the muffled thump of Victor's heart and the sound of his booted feet breaking twigs. She tilted her head and watched his profile. Dried, dark red blood crusted his ear and the side of his neck. The memory of him covering her as blood poured from his ears snapped back into place. "Are you all right?" she asked, then pursed her lips as her question hit her stupidity. He couldn't hear. Victor seemed to sense her gaze. He looked down, offered a mannered, overly bright smile, and spoke even louder. "Don't worry. For now, it's like being deaf, but my sleepy old partner will fix it in a minute. And I can't read lips, so how about letting the universal translator handle the conversation?" Before he finished, Thing had wriggled free from Wednesday's small black bag. It scampered down her sleeve and tapped the cake box lid with proud little nails, announcing its presence. Wednesday took a steadying breath and reverted to her icier tone. "That plague doctor, confirmed dead?" Thing dove into its pantomime. It splayed 5 fingers, made an explosion motion, then sent 2 fingers running away, an elaborate mime for being blown to pieces. Victor watched and translated. "Blown to smithereens," he said. "But he might not be entirely dead." He said, "See you next time." That mechanical body could have been a remote puppet. The real body, who knows which dark sewer or server cluster it's lurking in. "And the monster hide?" Wednesday asked. Thing immediately transformed into hide, with 4 fingers skittering like running legs while the thumb and index pinched an invisible stench to its nose. Flailing one hand as if bellowing, "It stinks! Gotta run!" Victor sighed with theatrical grief. Ran off in the chaos, what a loss. The boss wasn't finished, the legendary plasma lightsaber wasn't looted, and, he gestured tragically at the cake box, even the dessert that was practically in my mouth flew away. My heart is bleeding. Because of his ruptured eardrums, every word he bellowed sounded hopelessly overdramatic in his own head. To everyone else, he was simply a man carrying an unconscious girl and a cake box down a ruined path, followed by a proud, miming Thing and the occasional faint weight of a symbiote finally taking a nap. 48. Victor Black Syndrome. Wednesday was silent for a beat, the stillness of the woods stretching the moment out. When she spoke again, there was the barest thread of embarrassment in her voice. "So in the plan to get back to the academy, hike while being carried like a princess takes priority over summon a taxi?" Vic answered loudly. "Sorry, no money. Venom has all my cash, and he's currently sleeping like a dead pig." He paused, as if anticipating her next question, then added, "The money you had, well, it was only enough for this top-tier chocolate lava cake. Just consider it an advance on my severance pay and workplace injury condolences, former employer, miss." Wednesday pressed her lips together. The word, sorry, sat like a stone in her throat. She had never found it so hard to form words. "My previous behavior," she began, voice lower than usual, "in a specific context, based on incomplete information and faulty predictions, the expulsion strategy I adopted. Regarding the unintended emotional harm it caused, I believe, its appropriateness is open to debate." She trailed off into a long, academic-sounding string of self-justification, cheeks burning, unable to simply the 3 words she meant. Thing watched, its tiny fingers stalling mid-gesture, then froze on the cake box as if decrypting a complex message. After a few seconds, it leapt up, had an epiphany, solemnly knelt on one finger, placed the other hand over its heart, and dipped its head in an absurdly exaggerated bow of apology, an over-the-top, unambiguous display of contrition. Vic stopped in his tracks, eyes going wide as he stared down at Thing, then back at Wednesday with theatrical disbelief. His voice rose with mock drama. "Whoa, wait, did I just hear that? In this moment of total deafness, my soul seems to have heard heavenly music. Did those words actually come from the mouth of Miss Wednesday Addams? Or is this the improvisation of our artistically gifted little translator?" Wednesday shot Thing a glare so cold it could disassemble small appliances. Thing quivered, feeling as if it'd taken the wrong turn into a nightmare. It looked around pitiably, gave both of them an indignant double middle finger, then scuttled away, burying itself in Wednesday's bag and playing dead. Wednesday glanced up to gauge Vic's reaction and ran straight into his smile. There was no mockery, no triumph, only an odd, knowing warmth, as if he had long since seen through her clumsy defenses. "All right," he said, smiling, his voice slowing though still loud. "I forgive you, Miss Wednesday Addams." A strange warmth hit Wednesday, and she quickly lowered her head, staring at the cake box. Vic resumed walking with long strides, speaking to himself in a gentler tone. "To be honest," he said, "those words of yours were pretty hurtful. They nearly smashed my heart, cobbled together out of chocolate and madness, into pieces. If Thing hadn't just vividly informed me that a certain young lady stands by my bed every night like a melancholy ghost, staring at me with the intensity of a frog dissection for over half an hour, I might not have forgiven you so easily." Wednesday froze. He knew. He knew everything, including the late-night stares she had thought were secret. A fresh, intense humiliation, social death magnified, crushed her. She wanted the ground to open and swallow her, and this damned man who knew everything, or at least wanted the cake in her hands to melt and drown her. Vic felt her stiffen and chuckled softly. The vibration ran through his chest and into her. "Don't worry, I'll keep the matter of the Addams brand surveillance camera a secret, and—" He hesitated, then added in a tone that surprised her with its tenderness, "Thank you." Wednesday buried her burning face in the cake box. Vic tightened his hold instinctively, feeling the rare, almost rigid stillness of the person in his arms. The smile at his mouth deepened. He could feel her hide behind the box, an awkward attempt at concealment that only emphasized how different it was from the cold, razor-edged Wednesday he knew. The contrast softened him in a way that outweighed the inconvenience of his hearing loss and the ache of his exhausted body. He shifted his arms deliberately, letting her lean more securely against him, his movements careful and gentle. Wednesday felt the steady thud of his heart against her cheek as he walked, and even through the cake box, the unmistakable protection in his embrace. Heat crawled up her face and burned to the tips of her ears, absurdly at odds with her usual coolness. Her heart, an organ she had always considered merely efficient, began to hammer wildly against her ribs, a frantic, distracting rhythm, as if it were pounding on some truth she had been denying. She tried to analyze herself clinically. Elevated temperature, arrhythmia, flushed capillaries. This must be a pathological reaction. She reached desperately for rational footholds. After we get back, I must reread Analysis of Adolescent Romantic Psychology. Even if the author is an emotional imbecile, she thought, clinging to reason. The moment that thought surfaced, it was shattered by the simple, involuntary tightening of Vic's arms as he drew her closer. The truth struck like lightning across a dark sky, clear, sharp, undeniable. She, Wednesday Addams, was in love. The object of that love was the madman holding her, deaf, grinning, part mad, part chocolate, marked a failure by the lab but braver than anyone she knew. There was no moonlit confession, no elegant verse, not even normal conversation, just the aftermath of an explosion, physical pain, the absurdity of his deafness, and an overly sweet lava cake. It was chaotic and aesthetically lacking, and yet certain beyond doubt. The realization didn't panic her. Instead, it calmed her like cold water dousing fever. She had invented a name for this pathology, Victor Black syndrome. Diagnosing her own tachycardia with that label felt like the most Gothic rational declaration of affection, love reduced to an observable, categorizable fact. A sentimentalist's final confession in a scientist's language, I used every method available, and finally diagnosed that I love you. From some unnoticed angle, her arms slipped, tiny, tentative around his neck, just enough to press closer. Vic's steps faltered for a heartbeat and then steadied. They walked through twilight toward the academy's flickering lights, his smile more genuine and bright than any prank success, and his hold around her more real than any promise. 49. Good night and cake. As Vic carried Wednesday toward the school gates, they saw Enid pacing anxiously, biting her nails like a small wolf trapped inside a cage. My God, Vic! Wednesday! Enid's blonde hair flew behind her as she rushed over. I'm so glad you're okay. Wednesday tried to unwind her arms from Vic's neck, but the movement stalled. She weighed, internally, maintained Gothic detachment against collapse in a puddle in Vic's arms, and, very reluctantly, tightened her grip. As Enid reached them, her footsteps stopped. The smile smothered into alarm. Both were smeared with mud and dry leaves, and the dried blood on Vic's ear showed up stark against the twilight. She gasped. Hey, Enid. Vic's voice was too loud, and his smile too bright. Guess what? We won. Those plague doctors were no big deal. He tried to hide how rough he looked with bravado, but his trembling arms and pale face betrayed him. Enid's eyes fixed on his ear. Her voice trembled. Vic, your ear. She reached out and touched the darkened blood with the tip of a finger. Tears swelled up immediately. Oh, I should have gone with you. Does it hurt? Vic couldn't hear every word Enid said, but he could imagine. Don't worry, it's fine, he blurted, shifting the way he held Wednesday. Once that sleepyhead Venom wakes up, he'll fix the eardrum in minutes. I just can't hear for now. Enid shivered at the thought of Venom also being hurt. She could picture how savage the fight had been. Vic tried to change the subject, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. Come on, give me a hand. Wednesday's light, but carrying her this far has worn me out. Wednesday tightened her arms around his neck in warning, and with the faintest pinch, squeezed his ear. Miss Addams had learned a new trick all on her own. Vic fumbled for cover. He corrected quickly. This chocolate cake she's carrying is pretty heavy. Can you help with it? Of course. Enid snatched up the cake box. The sweet smell of chocolate felt almost obscene against the charged mood. The walk back to the dorm was unusually quiet. Vic's usual chatter was gone, replaced by heavy footsteps and shallow breaths. That silence unnerved Enid and Wednesday more than any shouting would have. When they reached the dorm, Vic laid Wednesday gently on her black silk bed, careful as if handling something fragile. He looked from Enid to Wednesday and in a low, serious voice said, Enid, Wednesday, you know, I'm really lucky to have friends like you. Both of them were stunned. This soft, earnest Vic was something new. After we escaped the lab, he continued, eyes far away, Venom and I went a little lawless. We did a lot of messed up things. Robbed candy stores, blew up assembly lines in chocolate factories. If I hadn't met Dracula and been taken back to the inn, I might have become a complete villain. He smiled, a rare warmth in it. Even though Dracula yelled every day about throwing me out, he still took me in. Mavis would secretly leave an extra portion of blood pudding for me. Jonathan dragged me to listen to that loud, tacky dance music, and little Dennis, he was always pestering me to tell him fairy tales. Then I came here and met you both. His eyes moved between Enid and Wednesday. All the luck in my life must have been used up right here. It was the Dracula family's nagging that kept me from going bad. It was Dennis growing fangs to protect his friends that gave me the courage to leave Transylvania. Enid, your smile and your chocolate pulled me back from the edge of nightmares again and again. He looked at Wednesday with something like tenderness and something hard to call anything but gratitude. And you, Wednesday, you forced me to face my fears the hardest way, but you also let me see that someone is worth being brave for. Thank you, he said softly, the smile tired but genuine. I'm really, really glad I met you. He closed his eyes, smiled, and fell back onto his own small bed as if he'd completed a final task. Oh, Vic? No, no, Enid's face drained. Wednesday sat bolt upright for the first time, showing real panic. Vic looked exactly like someone giving a deathbed farewell. Then Vic suddenly sat up again and added, By the way, I'm not dead, just dead tired. I desperately need sleep now. I hope we all have sweet dreams tonight. He grinned that familiar mischievous grin, like a prankster who just pulled one off. Of course, my dreams will be sweeter than yours. I still have the thought of a whole chocolate cake. Good night." He collapsed and was asleep in an instant, leaving a stunned Enid and a complex-looking Wednesday facing each other in the dim dorm room. Enid stayed frozen, tears trembling on her lashes. Wednesday had snapped her composure back on, but a closer look showed her knuckles were white where her hands were folded on her lap. "That idiot!" Enid whispered, a tearful curse, hastily wiping at her face. She crept forward and put a trembling finger under Vic's nose. His breath was warm and steady. She sagged with relief and nearly sat down on the floor. "He's just asleep." Wednesday's voice was calm and flat, as if the brief panic had never existed. She didn't look at Enid. Her dark eyes were on Vic's sleeping face, noting the dark blood on his ear and the deep lines of exhaustion at his brow. "I know. I was just scared to death." Enid sniffed and steadied herself, worry sharpening again. "He looks awful. And Venom, is he really okay?" "Venom needs chocolate for self-repair," Wednesday said, matter of fact. Her gaze flicked to the cake Enid had set down. "Theoretically, this chocolate should provide the necessary energy." "Then what are we waiting for? I'll feed Vic, and we have to make Venom get better quickly." Enid reached for the cake box. "Wait," Wednesday stopped her. "Feeding it to Vic will only put it through his digestive system for basic metabolism. It won't reach the symbiote efficiently. We need a more direct method." Enid blinked, confused. Wednesday opened the cake box, the room filled with the rich aroma. She pulled out a knife and cut off an enormous slice, nearly 3/4 of the cake. Without hesitation, she walked to Vic's bedside and, with a brisk, businesslike motion, plastered the slice onto Vic's half-open mouth and cheek. Enid made a small, shocked sound and covered her mouth. It was exactly the kind of thing Wednesday would do. Thick chocolate sauce and sponge smeared over the lower half of Vic's face, crumbs falling into the hollow of his neck. The effect was immediate. The dark symbiote on Vic's face writhed. Like a cluster of hungry black tentacles, it lunged outward and devoured the chocolate at incredible speed. Mmm. Vic smacked his lips in his sleep, his face relaxing into a silly, satisfied smile even without waking. Within seconds, the cake was gone, licked clean, not even a crumb left on his skin. The black matter drew back, disappearing smoothly into him. His skin looked as if nothing had happened. "Thanks and good night." A faint voice, like a whisper inside a dream, echoed in Wednesday's mind. It was Venom. Outside the window, the night had completely fallen. 50. Declaration of Love Night wrapped Nevermore Academy in a heavy, velvet hush. The dormitory was still. Only Vic's steady, long breaths rose and fell in the darkness. Enid smoothed the quilt over him, tucking the corners with careful fingers. When her fingertips brushed the dried blood near his ear, her heart tightened for a moment. She turned to go back to her bed and met Wednesday Addams' unblinking eyes in the dim light. Wednesday's gaze lacked its usual icy precision. There was a rare, puzzled focus to it. "Enid," she said, her voice lower than usual. "Hmm?" Enid answered automatically, pulse quickening. "Loving someone." Wednesday's speech was slower than normal, as if she were choosing the exact angle at which to let a scalpel fall to dissect a concept. "What does it feel like?" The question was abrupt and utterly out of character. Enid blinked, stunned, then a bright warmth chased away her fatigue. She practically skipped to the edge of her bed, curling her legs up and clasping her hands at her chest. "Oh, loving someone?" Her voice softened, as if revealing the world's most precious secret. "It's like 100 butterflies moved into your chest. As soon as he gets close, they all start flapping." She tilted her head, a faint blush coloring her cheeks, lost in memory. "You want to see him every second. When he smiles, it's like every sun in the world lights up. When he's sad, your sky goes gray with him. You want to be near him, but you're afraid of being too close, afraid he'll hear your heart pounding like thunder. If he accidentally touches your fingertips, they tingle forever, and your whole body feels both sweet and terrified." She rambled on, about the first time Vic gave her that exaggerated grin, his silly but brilliant smile, the way he could be unexpectedly thoughtful beneath his wild exterior. She remembered every detail. Her voice fell, the blush shaded by a deeper shadow. Silence settled for a few seconds. When she looked up again, a shimmer of tears and a raw vulnerability glinted in her eyes. "Wednesday, did you know?" she whispered, trembling with self-mockery. There are only two possibilities for a werewolf who hasn't managed to transform on a full moon yet. Either the werewolf bloodline is too weak, they're a defective product the pack rejects, or they're a rarer alpha werewolf, more violent and uncontrollable, someone the pack will eye with suspicion or maybe even hunt once they awaken. She gave a bitter little smile and hugged her knees tight. Neither is good. Do you know why I was the only one in this dorm before you all came? Because I applied for a single room. I wanted to get used to the idea of complete loneliness in advance so that when it actually arrived, I wouldn't break. Her gaze drifted toward the sleeping Vic. Her eyes softened as if he were the single light in a winter night. Then you and Vic came. He barreled in like a tornado. Recalling it made her lips curve. He didn't care about werewolf rules or bloodlines. He told me not to listen to those idiots. He even gave me that silly, bright pink gift. Her voice brimmed with gratitude and something tender. He told me not to be afraid of being alone, that he'd always be with me. Maybe. That's when I fell hopelessly in love with this madman. She buried her face in her knees, shoulders trembling as if a long-held weight had been set down and all her secrets exposed. Wednesday listened impassively, her dark pupils like ancient wells reflecting the colors on Enid's face without a ripple. When Enid's breath hitched, shy and excited, Wednesday spoke again, steady as if reading an autopsy. Based on your description, she said, eyes fixed on a point in the dim room as if pulling facts from memory, and on the clinical symptoms I've developed, feverishness, sudden heart palpitations, trouble concentrating, and prolonged, purposeless staring. She looked back at Enid, expression flat as ever. I have been most likely diagnosed. It appears I have fallen in love with Victor Black. The air froze. The smile on Enid's face snapped off as if in an instant. She sprang up, eyes wide, disbelief clouding into a mist. What? She shrieked, the sound cracking in the quiet night. You? What did you say? How could you? How could you do this? Tears came without warning, big and hot. You were always so mean to him, scolding him, hitting him, never giving him a kind face, and now you say this like it's nothing, that you're in love? What right do you have? Why? Anger and grievance surged through her, voice breaking. I was the one who showed him my secrets and my fears first. I was the one who fell in love with him first. What right do you have to just so easily? She dissolved into sobs. Wednesday simply watched, the quiver of her shoulders, the red rims of her eyes, that bare, naked heartbreak. She didn't argue or explain. Her face stayed pale and still, but in those usually frosty eyes something complex and unfamiliar flickered, confusion, and perhaps a faint, indistinguishable twinge that might have been pain. Enid wiped at her face, breathing hard, and let her anger deflate into something like weary understanding. She looked at the Gothic girl who, for all her trouble with love, wrapped herself in an impenetrable chill. A bitter, absurd sympathy crept in. Sniffling, she spoke again, voice lower, nasal with tears and a grudging acceptance. Right, that madman. He's heartless when he smiles, lawless when he acts up, but he can always walk right into someone's heart. There's no stopping him. Silence fell, broken only by Vic's sleeping breaths. Enid drew a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and met Wednesday's gaze. The red in her eyes faded, replaced by a stubborn, wolfish resolve. Fine, she announced, voice rough but clear. Wednesday Addams, I officially declare war on you. She even managed a tearful, fiercely determined smile. I like Vic. I like him very, very much. I will never give up on him. She took a step forward, tone sharpening into warning. But you are not allowed to use Gothic tricks. No poisoning, no hypnosis, no having things swap love letters or sabotage anything. We play fair. Do you hear me? Wednesday listened without change of expression, though the corner of her mouth twitched as if the hint of a smile tried to appear. Very well, she said flatly. I accept your challenge. Her dark eyes swept Enid, and she added, in the dry, precise way only she had, although, based on existing data analysis, your chances of winning are infinitesimally close to zero. Also, the definition of fair is debatable. You are clearly more suited to conventional tactics like smiling and baking cookies. It was probably the closest thing to praise Wednesday could offer. The two stared at each other, and an odd tension filled the room. The scent of competitive gunpowder mingled with a new, strange understanding born of sharing the same heavy emotion. On this night, a fresh, inevitably extraordinary rivalry drew its curtain. And the cause of it all, Victor Black was deep in sleep, smacking his lips and mumbling into the dark, "Chocolate, hey." 51. An unspoken war. In a dark room, cold nutrient solution leaked from the seams of a life support pod's transparent hatch, bringing with it a sharp scent of ionized ozone and disinfectant. The young man inside sat up abruptly, coughing as if trying to shake the after-effects of a violent explosion from his lungs. Tsk, the sensory feedback for self-destruction is absolutely awful, he muttered, rubbing his temples. As his thoughts cleared, the discomfort in his face shifted quickly into something like exhilaration and greed. That old fool, Dr. 062, he sneered, tapping his fingertips against the rim of the pod. The last images from the synchronous consciousness replay still flickered behind his eyes, how that black symbiotic substance had invaded his prosthetic body, briefly seized control, and even altered his structure. Biological traits, yet capable of interfering with or mastering mechanical consciousness, an almost perfect biological plasticity. Dr. 077's breathing quickened, a fanatical light shone in his eyes, as if he had stumbled onto a new continent. How is this a failure? This is the ideal path for evolution, a living, walking treasure trove of biotechnology. What had been a routine observation of the resurrection phenomenon had hooked an unimaginable prize. At that moment, the sealed door slid open with a hiss, and a slit of cold white light cut through the darkness, showing the room's true scale. Hundreds of identical life support pods, lined up like a metallic graveyard, stretching to the far wall with an oppressive, inhuman order. A figure stood in the doorway. "Dr. 077, you have awakened. Number 32 is at your service," the uniformed man said, his voice steady and devoid of feeling, but in his gaze there burned an absolute loyalty, devout and unquestioning. Dr. 077 didn't look up. "Go to the warehouse and bring SO1 Unit 1 to Modification Room 3, immediately." "Yes, as you command," Number 32 replied and turned without hesitation. He took one step, then froze, a faint, almost human uncertainty flickering across his face. "What is it?" Dr. 77 asked, a sliver of impatience in his voice. Number 32 faced him again, seeking instruction. "01 Unit 1 is." Dr. 77's expression tightened. He slowly raised his head, watching the man who displayed perfect obedience but lacked certain basic common sense. With a weary exhale, as if he carried more strain than his years should allow, he ground out the clarification, word by reluctant word. "Bring the Terminator T-800 model to Modification Room 3. Understood?" Recognition snapped across Number 32's features like a re-engaged circuit. "Yes, understood." "Everything for the evolution of mankind," he added, saluted smartly, and strode out. The door sealed behind him, and the room returned to the darkness fit for thinking. After a long silence, Dr. 07 couldn't help but hiss under his breath, glaring at the empty space. To hell with Hollywood. Elsewhere, in the Nefermore Academy dormitory, the air smelled faintly of chocolate and gunpowder. Vic, who had regained his hearing a few days prior, lay on his narrow bed by the bathroom door, legs crossed and reading 1,000 magical potions from Entry to the Grave. He pushed the book aside, cocked his head, and eyed his two roommates with suspicion. "I say," he drawled, eyes dancing with manic light, "are you two hiding something from me? You're acting weird." On the other side of the room, the scene was, in fact, off. Enid Sinclair sat before a small mirror, dipping a soft brush repeatedly into her new bottle of liquid foundation, layering coat after coat onto her already pale cheeks. A closer look showed she'd done this a dozen times today. The bottle she'd opened yesterday was nearly empty. She radiated nervous energy, as if trying to paint over her thoughts. Wednesday Addams stood by her evidence board, arms folded, motionless. The board was plastered with close-up photos of bloodied limbs, clippings of case reports, and several prophetic-sounding sketches rendered in eerie strokes. Her dark eyes were sharp, but she seemed disengaged from the clues she already knew, more removed than focused. Vic planted himself up, one leg swinging, pretending to be the all-seeing observer. "Let's break this down, usually at this hour." He jabbed a finger at Enid. Our own little wolf girl Enid would be under the rose trellis with her sisters, sipping syrupy tea and talking about the latest nail art or who's dating who. He pivoted to Wednesday. and our Gothic detective Wednesday would be out chasing leads on the Hyde murders, following traces of Joseph Crackstone's influence. He sat bolt upright, his book thumped to the floor. But today, he flailed. Enid, look at you. You've layered on a dozen coats of foundation. Girl, you're so pale you could be Wednesday's twin who crawled out of a coffin. Your brand new bottle is sacrificing itself for beauty. Then he jabbed at Wednesday. And you, Captain, that board, 3 days staring at it. You reached a conclusion yesterday. Those missing organs from the Hyde victims are the key to resurrecting that old Crackstone relic. You even said you'd set up monitors in the sewers marked on your prophetic drawings where the Hyde might appear. So tell me, what are you looking at now? The room went icy. Enid's brush hovered mid-stroke. Wednesday's fingers tightened across her chest. They exchanged a quick, electric glance and turned on Vic at the same instant. Vic, tomorrow night, they said together, then both fell silent, mouths snapping shut as a mutual rule against speaking first took hold. Competition, warning, and unspoken agreement flashed between them. The scent of gunpowder in the air seemed suddenly thick enough to suffocate. Tomorrow night, Vic's curiosity lit up. What about tomorrow night? A party? A limited edition chocolate drop? Or ding-dong? His phone chimed in his pocket. He checked the screen. Owl Express. Your order has arrived at the Academy mailroom. Please collect it using your pickup code. Oh, my baby's here, Vic cried, abandoning all other concerns. He leapt from the bed, grinning like he'd seen true love bloom. Excuse me, girls. We'll talk about your tomorrow night later. He fled the dorm, humming off key, leaving behind the two girls and a room thick with unresolved tension. Enid and Wednesday watched him go in silence. The interrupted conversation now felt heavier, as if the secret they were both guarding demanded a contest not yet finished. 52. The potions master in the toilet. The dormitory door closed softly behind Vic, leaving a taut silence in its wake. Enid rose slowly, her fingertips twisting the lace of her nightgown without meaning to. Her voice held a forced cheer that barely hid the resolve beneath it. Vic's my date for the dance tomorrow, she announced. He's been stressed. He needs to relax and have some normal social interaction. Wednesday didn't look up. Her gaze remained fixed on the grisly clues pinned to the wall. Her voice came out like a stone dropped into still water. The dance. A collective hysteria that packages meaningless limb flailing, excessive sugar consumption, and superficial social posturing as entertainment. Utterly moronic. At last she turned her head. Her pupils were still dark and unreadable, but there was a razor-bright intensity in them. Vic's time would be better spent on more efficient matters. He's coming with me tomorrow night to set up surveillance at the forest's edge. According to the prophetic paintings, the Hyde is likely to appear there. It's the best chance to track signs of Creston's resurrection and possibly draw out the plague doctor behind the scenes. You just want to keep him tethered to your side, Enid shot back, heat rising in her voice. With all those grim so-called official matters. You don't care if he needs rest or happiness. Enid pressed. You don't care at all. Wednesday's reply was steady and clinical, each word a scalpel, and you simply want to drag him into a false, mediocre tranquility, cheap music and sweet cake, while ignoring the threats closing in. That short-sighted happiness is the height of irresponsibility. The space between them seemed to narrow, a silent tug of war until they could almost feel the warmth of one another's breath. Enid lowered her voice, a challenge threaded through it. Admit it, you just want him all to yourself. The corner of Wednesday's mouth twitched downward into something like a sneer. The feeling is mutual. There was a crackle in the air, as if sparks might flicker. Then let's see who can do more, Enid said, chin raised like a stubborn werewolf. Wednesday didn't flinch. Suits me fine. Just then, the dormitory door opened and Vic poked his head in, clutching a delivery box stamped with an owl logo. He blinked between the two girls, who were practically shoulder to shoulder, his face a mix of confusion and cautious alarm. Did I miss something important? Should I go back out for another walk and give you two some private space? No. They snapped apart in unison, both flustered by being caught. Vic retreated, neck shrinking, and edged inside with his package. He muttered under his breath, Fine. Looks like I really did come back at the wrong time. He felt the air in the dorm go several degrees colder than the Nevermore cellars. Carrying the box, he headed straight for the bathroom and shut the door behind him. The small, damp room felt claustrophobic. Vic sat with his back against the door and the package in his lap, tearing off the tape. Seriously, he muttered to Venom in his mind while he dug through packing foam. Girls are weird. One minute, everything's fine. The next, they're two meteors about to collide. A small black head slipped from his collar. Venom's large white eyes gave a humanly exasperated roll before it receded slightly. Vic's emotional intelligence was uneven. Sometimes he could read people like open books. Other times, he plunged into bafflement. The gunpowder tension he'd just walked into belonged to the latter category. From the box, he produced an old-fashioned little pot, a stack of jars with obscure labels, and bundles of dried plants. Then he flipped to a dog-eared page in a brick-thick tome, 1,000 Magical Potions, from Entry to the Grave. The recipe name made his eyes go wide. Good and Evil Potion. Since the scuffle with a semi-mechanical plague doctor, Vic had been painfully aware of his and Venom's lack of combat power. Last time, they'd scraped through by trickery and sheer luck. Technology was a dead end. The opponent was too far ahead. So Vic had turned to the occult. He'd scoured the Nightshade's restricted stacks and found this book. The idea of temporarily splitting a person into purely good and purely evil aspects, based on some ancient Eastern zodiac magic, was too tempting. "This is perfect," Vic said aloud, excitement brightening his face. "Next time it's not a duel, it's a fair fight, 2-on-1. He rolled up his sleeves and got to work. Venom slithered free again, muffled reading the instructions. Step 1. Heat a pot of water, Venom intoned. Vic set the tiny pot on an alcohol stove and poured in distilled water. Once the water is hot, add sliced beef to the pot. Venom continued. Vic froze, knife in hand. "Wait, buddy, are you sure that's right? This sounds like you're teaching me how to make beef soup, not brewing a soul-splitting potion." Venom's tendrils tapped the page, confirming. "That's what's written. Note, recipe written by a Chinese mage." Vic blinked, then brightened. "Oh, that explains it. Magic with a culinary twist. Makes total sense." He tossed beef slices into the simmering water with a flourish. The list of ingredients grew stranger. Centipede legs dried in moonlight, mandrake root harvested in times of sorrow, and so on. Vic moved with an almost frantic precision, following each odd instruction. The bathroom filled with a curiously appetizing medicinal aroma, part stew, part herbal salve. Step 12. Add 3 drops of crocodile tears. Vic carefully dripped a murky liquid from a teardrop vial into the pot. And the final step, Venom's voice trembled a touch. Add chocolate and stir evenly. Vic stared at the bubbling, oddly hued brew for 2 seconds. Chocolate? Is this a potion or a weird stew sauce? Complaining, he fished a square of dark chocolate from his pocket, snapped it into pieces, and dropped them in. He stirred with a glass rod. Honestly, it's not that complicated, he told himself as the chocolate melted and the mixture smoothed. Though I could use a bigger spoon. Back in the dorm, Enid, frozen in the stillness with Wednesday, sniffed the air. Her deep blue eyes widened in disbelief. What is Vic doing in the bathroom? That smell. It's like he's cooking something terrifying. Wednesday's brow knitted imperceptibly, but her voice remained icily composed. What else would he be doing in the bathroom besides using it? Is he simmering soup for you? The bathroom door clicked open. Vic leaned out, terribly earnest about his experiment, oblivious to the charged atmosphere in the room. He walked to his bed, dug under a pile of junk, and hauled out a huge, long-handled iron ladle. He gave the 2 stiff-faced girls an awkward, almost shy smile, then, ladle in hand, ducked back into the bathroom and shut the door again. Outside, the dorm sank into a deathly quiet. Enid's shock had curdled into a sort of hollow bemusement. She turned to Wednesday and murmured, "Wednesday, I think you might have been right." Wednesday said nothing. Vic's unpredictable behavior had once more stretched the bounds of what she considered possible. Vic held the giant iron spoon and stirred vigorously in the small pot that bubbled with eerie, popping bubbles. The viscous liquid was an indescribable color and texture, somewhere between a thick meat stew and swamp sludge. "Is it done after I finish stirring?" Vic panted. Venom leaned in for a closer look. "Wait, one more thing. The book says you need to hold a casting medium and chant an incantation toward the potion. Recommended mediums: dried pufferfish or octopus tentacles. The incantation is, he paused as if aware of how ridiculous it sounded. Evil spirits, be gone! Evil spirits, be gone! Vic stopped stirring and stared, dazed. Was that in the book before? Did I miss it? I don't even have octopus tentacles. Venom was silent for a beat, then casually extended a pitch-black tentacle. With a wet squelch, he severed it and tossed the still wriggling segment into Vic's hand. The piece of flesh shivered in Vic's palm, slick and alive. Take it. This will have to do, Venom said like he was handing over a pen. Vic pinched the slimy tentacle, lips twitching, but he raised it nonetheless. Aiming it at the pot, he drew a breath to chant. One more thing, Venom added. Enunciate clearly when you chant. Fine. I got it. Vic adjusted his breathing and prepared again. One more thing, Venom continued. Flick your wrist. Use the medium to trace an exorcism path. Cough, cough, Vic started, veins bulging on his forehead. Are you finished yet? Where are all these one more things coming from? Venom pointed a tentacle at the open book as if innocent. Don't yell at me. I'm reading the text verbatim. The notes section is full of one more thing. Vic went silent, face falling apart. What the hell am I even looking at? This author. He squeezed the words through his teeth. Must be a dry, garlic-loving, rambling old man. Resigned, he raised the tentacle and, with an exaggerated wrist flick, chanted loudly in a farcical, healer-on-a-stage voice, Evil spirits, be gone! Evil spirits, be gone! The black tentacle began to emit a faint, oily green glow. The light swept over the potion like a searchlight. On contact, the bubbling liquid stilled. Every bubble vanished, leaving the surface smooth as a mirror. Is it done? Vic asked, lowering the tentacle to peer into the pot. Venom leaned over. Seems so, Vic frowned. Wait, the book said the finished potion should be red. Why is mine purple? Under the glow, the liquid was a deep, cool, dark purple. Venom blinked his huge white eyes and guessed, maybe it's so red it's turned purple. Vic stared at the pot, rubbed his chin, then brightened with mock admiration. Makes sense. No argument there. Old pal, you're the smart one. Your IQ must be 250, just like mine. Venom said nothing. Vic pulled out 2 goblets and poured the viscous, purple potion. The way it clung to the glass made it look like some oily, living thing. He raised his cup with ritual solemnity. To greater power. Cheers, brother. To an extra meal, Venom replied. Venom curled a tentacle around his goblet and clinked it against Vic's. The human and the symbiote smiled at each other, tipped their heads back, and drank at the same time. For a heartbeat, everything froze, their ecstatic smiles locked in place. Then, almost instantly, pfft, gag! They both spat violently. The goblet slipped, fell, and shattered on the tile. Vic doubled over, one hand gripping the toilet rim, while the other clawed at the back of his throat, dry heaves racking him. Ugh, kill me. He made sounds that were part sob, part retch. Tears and snot streamed down his face. It smelled like chocolate, but it tastes like... He couldn't finish. Venom sagged on Vic's shoulder, like a limp black sack, as if he'd had all his bones removed. The symbiote's massive maw hung open, and its long tongue lolled uselessly. Its white eyes stared, unfocused. A hoarse, rasping voice came out of it. It's shit! This is fucking chocolate-flavored shit! The bathroom door burst open. Enid rushed in first, terrified by the sound of breaking glass, and the two of them in agony. Wednesday followed, dagger reversed in her hand, eyes cold and precise. They froze at the sight, Vic heaving into the toilet, and Venom draped over him like a collapsed shadow. The air was curdled with a sickly sweet, foul stench. What did you do? What is that? You didn't drink it, did you? Enid blurted. Wednesday's face was as still as ice. She stepped forward, picked up the discarded heavy tome, and flipped to the dog-eared page Vic had marked. The corner of her mouth curled into a thin, unimpressed sneer. It seems our two great, confident duo have brewed a masterpiece that even they can't stomach. She let her gaze fall on Venom and the wobbling Vic. Perhaps the true effect of this potion is facing oneself honestly. Their taste test was quite precise. Vic's tongue lolled as he used the toilet rim to push himself upright. Before he could steady, his whole body shimmered like a television losing signal. His outline flickered between solid and translucent. What's going on? He stared at his hands. They jittered, switching from solid to faintly see-through. Did I flicker? Psst! The flickering intensified, rapid and crackling, his body resisting physics. The image blurred into a streaked, distorted silhouette of light and shadow with an electrical hiss. Uh-oh. From inside that distorted light, Vic's voice came, wry and helpless. Doesn't look good. Wednesday, Enid, wish me luck. One sharp click and the static collapsed inward. Then, with an instant of clarity, like a TV finally tuning in, the picture snapped into focus. Hey, I'm okay. No more flicker. A second voice, perfectly synchronized, overlapped the first. Okay, something's not quite right. Two Vics looked up at the same time. Every movement, expression, and bewildered frown mirrored perfectly, as if watched in a mirror. Motherfucker, I did it, they said in unison, elation ringing identical. The elation lasted a second. Then both Vics' faces tightened. They touched their own cheeks, then pointed at each other, realization dawning. Wait, it's not a split into good and evil, they said, voices tinged with growing dread. It's one consciousness, controlling two bodies at once. A stunned silence fell. Wednesday and Enid stood frozen, eyes wide, watching the surreal sight of two identical Victor Blacks moving and speaking in perfect sync, the same single mind inhabiting two forms. It was far stranger and far more terrifying than any neat split into halves. The two Vics pressed their foreheads at the same instant, movements mirror perfect, as if someone had hit rewind on the same recording. Wait, let me calm down first, they said in unison, voices colliding and echoing off the cramped restroom tiles until the sound felt almost uncanny. They lowered their hands together, faces frozen in identical comical expressions of shock. After a beat, they both snapped their heads toward each other. The motion, angle, and timing were exact. Where is Venom? They demanded at the same time. Silence answered them. Since that catastrophic tasting and the bizarre splitting that followed, their usual loud, complaining, gluttonous symbiote had gone completely quiet. A cold premonition settled over the single consciousness they shared. Venom, they tried again, tentative. No reply. Venom, this time the shout was frantic. Still nothing. Venom. The last syllable stretched out, soft and coaxing, bouncing lonely and thin off the tiles. Please be quieter. A voice, gentle and almost timid, came from the Vic on the left, soft, unlike Venom's normal raspy bellow. Please. It's too loud. I have a headache. From the Vic on the right, a harsher voice erupted like sandpaper. Shut up, bastard! Be quiet! Under the stunned stares of Wednesday and Enid, something else happened at once on both men. From the left Vic's neck, a viscous symbiotic substance seeped out, but it wasn't Venom's familiar black. It was a pearly, soft white. It flowed around his throat like living silk and settled into a neat, turtleneck-like collar, the whole thing somehow polite in its posture. On the right, Vic's head, a restless mass of dark, grayish-black symbiote burst forth, boiling and writhing until it formed a jagged crown-like mane of spikes and angry twists, radiating violent intent. The white symbiote adjusted itself slightly and spoke again, that same gentle voice, a shy suggestion in its tone. Please call me Serum. The gray thing snapped a sharp tentacle and wrapped the right Vic's temple with an impatient thunk. I'm Riot! Remember that, you trash! Both Vics froze, statues with identical expressions. Together they lowered their eyes to the elegant white scarf at one throat, then looked up to the fierce gray crown on the other. The realization hit simultaneously, absurd and shattering. Oh my God, they breathed in perfect sync. I wasn't split into good and evil, the left Vic muttered. Venom was split into good and evil, the right Vic finished. Serum's voice threaded with a little embarrassment as it rubbed the left Vic's neck. I'm sorry to meet you like this. But yes, the intense taste shock and whatever energy was released, well, it seems to have torn us apart. Riot sneered and churned, gray matter lashing. Ha! Good riddance. I was sick of that indecisive glutton. This is much better. Instinctively, the two men raised their hands, one to stroke Serum, the other to restrain Riot. Both motions froze halfway, faces twisted by the conflicting sensations of comfort and a splitting headache. The one consciousness fed two wildly different emotional streams. This feeling is too strange, said Vic White, left, voice soft and unsteady. Shut up. Adapt to it, barked Vic Gray. They spoke different things at the same time, but the collapse on their faces was identical. A dead, peculiar silence settled in the restroom. Wednesday's eyebrow twitched the smallest fraction, a peak of interest in her own private currency. Enid stood with her mouth open, staring between the white scarf and the gray crown, utterly overwhelmed. Serum, sensing the awkwardness, added quietly, nice to meet everyone." Riot spat a contemptuous sound. "Tooey!" The white and gray flickered violently, like bad reception on a screen. Then, as if swallowing both of them, a viscous black bled back over the pearly white and the dull gray until Venom's familiar, lightless black finally reasserted itself. Ugh! Damn it! Venom's rasp came from the left Vic's throat. A small tentacle rubbed where a temple would be. I feel awful, like I've been drenched in a whole barrel of expired, moldy chocolate syrup. Sticky, sickeningly sweet, and sour-smelling. "Oh, Venom, my brother." Both Vics burst into relieved smiles at once and cheered. "You're finally awake." The Venom perched on the right Vic's head thinned into a razor edge of fury. "Oh God, shut up! Both of you talking at once makes it worse." It snapped, then lashed out, almost spitting. "Look at what you did! That potion didn't split me into good and evil at all. Its tentacles flailed. It made me spawn. Damn it. Now I want to pour the rest of that potion into your skull. There's room enough to drive a carriage through." "We followed the steps written in the book," both Vics protested together, pointing immediately at the battered volume clutched in Wednesday's hands. 1,000 magical potions, from beginner to burial. Their hands met in the air with a synchronous smack. "All right." They shook the impact from their fingers, helpless expressions matching. "Controlling two minds, multitasking, shouldn't be too hard to adapt," they said as one, then closed their eyes like two technicians rerouting threads in a tangle of consciousness. A few seconds later, Vic Gray, still a little stiff, stepped forward and took the book from Wednesday. Let me see." He flipped to the dog-eared page and traced the list of ingredients and steps with a finger. Boil water in the pot, slice the beef, centipede legs, crocodile tears, all the steps are here. Huh? He flipped the page faster, confusion growing. "Wait, where's the chocolate?" He looked up at the Venom on his shoulder. "Didn't you say the last step required adding chocolate? Why isn't it in the recipe?" The Venom leaned forward, an anxious tentacle riffling through pages. It froze, then trembled. Carefully, as if handling something volatile, it turned one more page back. The familiar instruction appeared: add chocolate, representing a sweet gift, and stir clockwise until blended. "You flipped one page too many," Vic Gray said, his mouth twitching dryly. Venom was silent, guilt heavy enough to be audible even through the symbiote. With trembling fingers, Vic Gray turned the page back to the top. A different recipe title stared back at him. Love Potion, Sweet Intentions. Vic Gray's vision went dark, and he nearly lost his footing. "My God," he groaned, voice half despairing, half incredulous. "You mixed the recipes for the She's Zero and the Love Potion together? Between the two of us, whose head is more muddled, it's a miracle blessed by Merlin that we didn't poison ourselves to death with this stuff." Love Potion. Enid, who'd been hovering on the sidelines, perked up at the word. Her ears twitched, her eyes brightened, and she craned forward to peek at the book's pages, only to meet Wednesday's unreadable, all-seeing stare. Enid snapped her neck back as if burned, cheeks flushing. She began to whistle a tune off-key and nervously scanned the bathroom ceiling for water stains. The two Vics were frozen, slowly absorbing a truth even stranger than one of them having split into two. He had attempted a potion to separate good from evil and instead brewed a monstrous, unpredictable concoction that tasted like chocolate gone wrong, that made them retch, and that should have been consigned to the trash heap of history. It was the most devastating blow to his career as a potions master. Venom lay limp across Vic's shoulder, muttering weakly, "Well, at least now I know why that stuff tasted like chocolate-flavored crap. The taste of love is hard to describe." Vic stared at him. "When will this effect end?" The two Vics asked at the same time, voices trembling. "I don't know." Venom's tone came out thinner. The black, viscous mass that had cloaked them both dimmed. "A normal zero lasts about 2 days theoretically," he faltered. "But mixed with a love potion, who knows what chemical reactions will happen. I need to sleep. I feel like a dozen Randy Rhinos stamped on me. I'm going to sleep first." His voice dwindled into an incoherent mumble. "My 2 cubs, look after them for 2 days. When this ends, see you. Good night." "What the?" The two Vics were white with shock. "Wait, Venom, what do you mean? Going into confinement? Leaving this mess to us? Venom! Damn it!" No answer. Venom's signature deep black retreated like an ebbing tide, then vanished. As the darkness cleared, the pearl white and the gray-black forms resolved, like a film developing. Venom's consciousness slipped away as if a switch had been flipped. On Vic White's neck, the pearl white symbiote, serum, shimmered and settled into a clear, steady shape, giving off a gentle, almost timid presence. On Vic Gray's head, the gray-black symbiote, Riot, thickened and twisted into thorn-like ridges, exuding raw, impatient aggression. Both had fully regained their own minds. Hello, we meet again," Serum murmured apologetically. "I hope I haven't caused too much trouble." Riot lashed a tentacle against Vic Gray's temple. "Shut up, useless trash. If you keep talking, I'll pull out your tongue." Both Vics clutched their heads and crouched. "Ow, it hurts. Stop hitting me." Same consciousness, double the pain, double the helplessness. They looked at each other in identical, collapsing bewilderment. "So," Vic White said, voice small, "the situation is, Venom checked out and went to sleep," Vic Gray finished. "The good and evil he split into," Vic White added. "Have both been dumped on us?" They shouted together. Serum nuzzled Vic White's neck sheepishly. "I'll try, not to cause trouble," Riot sneered. "Ha, trouble? I am the trouble. Just you wait, useless host." Both Vics inhaled and exhaled in unison, then forced a rueful laugh. "Well," Vic White tried to be calm, "at least, the effect only lasts 2 days." Vic Gray tried to be hopeful. They said the sentence together, forcing cheer into it. Serum's voice was small. "Theoretically, yes. But with the love potion mixed in, there could be unpredictable side effects." "Shut up, idiot," Riot snapped. "Who told you to spoil it? It's only fun when the surprises hit harder." The two men froze again. Effect, unknown. Side effects, unknown. Status, temporarily twins of good and evil. Supervision targets. Myself, X2, plus a good symbiote and an evil symbiote. They exchanged looks that said the same thing. The next 48 hours were going to be the longest, most chaotic disaster of their lives. Enid watched them, unsure what to do. She poked Wednesday, who had been unusually calm. "Now, what do we do?" she whispered helplessly. A single, almost imperceptible corner of Wednesday's mouth tilted up, the rarest of smiles, and a flicker of something very close to pleasure flashed in her dark eyes. "Isn't this good?" she said, voice flat, like a pebble dropped into still water. "We can call a temporary truce." She glanced at Enid as if choosing an item at an auction. "Which color do you want?" "Huh?" Enid blinked, then realization lit her face. Delight bloomed in a brilliant smile. Of course, this was an opportunity, one Vic all to herself, no competition, no cold-shouldered Wednesday. "I want the white one." She practically leaped forward and clasped Vic White's arm possessively, fearfully, as if Wednesday might change her mind. Serum rippled and made a soft, shy sound. "Hello!" "Very good." Wednesday seemed satisfied. Without giving anyone time to object, she reached for Vic Gray, the one with the menacing gray crown of Riot, and said curtly, "Then the gray one is mine." She grabbed Vic Gray's arm and started to walk, as if merely going to the library rather than marching off toward a monster-infested cave marked in the 5. "Come on, follow me. We've wasted enough time." "What? He's yours? Wait, Wednesday? I haven't figured this out yet." Vic Gray stammered, bewildered, stumbling as she pulled him along. Sharing a single consciousness across 2 bodies finally revealed its drawbacks in full. Vic White, pale, lunged to stop her. "Wait, I'm still synchronizing. I'm not used to one mind controlling 2 bodies. Let me get used to it first. Something will go wrong." But his protest was too late. His one consciousness was being pulled in 2 directions at once. One body demanded to stand firmly, the other was already being hauled away. The result was utterly ridiculous. His torso twisted, arms flailed in opposite directions, and he looked like a man being stretched between 2 tides. He pitched forward, stumbled, and both Vic White and Vic Gray collapsed into a tangled heap before being dragged upright and hustled down the hall, Enid gushing on one side, Wednesday calm and unbothered on the other. Serum clung to Vic White, small and earnest. Riot barked orders into Vic Gray's ear. The 2 Vics were pulled along, half resisting, half resigned. As they were carried off, one dragged by affection, the other by calculation, everyone knew it. The next 48 hours would be chaotic, unpredictable, and probably catastrophic. But for now, they had to get moving. 56 Synchronous Disaster Bang. Before Vic White could finish his sentence, it felt as if an invisible force had slammed him into the tiled wall. His forehead struck cold ceramic with a dull thud. The pain blackened his vision. He clutched his head and howled, "Ow!" Serum tightened in alarm, its soft form slipping gently around the bruised spot. "Are you all right? Do you need anything?" Almost simultaneously, Vic Gray in the hallway felt as if he'd run headfirst into an invisible barrier. He staggered, clutching the exact same spot on his forehead, and let out an identical cry. Riot brandished its tentacles, writhing gleefully on Vic Gray's head, a cackle bubbling up, a laugh that begged to be punched. "Ha! You idiot! You don't even know how to walk. This is priceless." Wednesday stopped at last and looked back, one Vic wailing in the bathroom, the other hopping in the hallway, and the two companions, Serum's gentle rapping and Riot's maniacal taunting, so different in style. She assessed the chaos with cold, clinical eyes and came to a single objective conclusion. Fine. She let go of Vic Gray's arm without apology, only a factual judgment in her tone. You need to learn to operate both bodies at once. Synchronized pain and motor interference in a dangerous environment is tantamount to suicide. Both Vics rubbed their foreheads in perfect unison, their shared consciousness heavy with helplessness and a narrowing hint of despair. This synchronized state was far worse than they'd imagined. Afternoon sunlight filtered through dense leaves, dappled shadows falling on the path as Wednesday pulled Vic Gray along without compromise. So, Vic Gray's voice held equal parts realization and wry amusement. "So that's why you two were so odd this morning. The foundation bit flying everywhere, zoning out at the clue board. You both wanted me to come out with you?" Wednesday's profile was rigid at his side, voice flat and emotionless. "Enid believes you require meaningless socialization for so-called relaxation. I believe your time should be spent on higher efficiency, more valuable matters, not squandered on the superficial." Her sentence cut off short. She halted mid-step. Her eyes flicked downward to her own hand, wrapped in a black sleeve, and another hand Vic's was quietly and warmly holding it within his palm. "Vic," her voice betrayed no feeling. If one listened closely, a barely suppressed quiver could be detected. "What is your hand doing?" "Huh?" Vic Gray glanced down, bewildered. When he realized his right hand was snug in Wednesday's, his confusion flipped to shock. "Oh, wait, sorry, this isn't intentional. I didn't mean to." He tried to pull his hand back, but stopped midway, as if straining to sense something. "It's my right hand. Its movements are synchronized with the other side." He explained awkwardly, eyes flitting as though listening to the other Vic. "Let me see. On the other Vic's side, Enid is dragging me to go shopping. So that's why." He inhaled, concentrating as if debugging a system. "Hold on, I'm trying to cancel this synchronization command." "No," Wednesday interrupted, with her gaze fixed on the corridor ahead. She didn't look at him or withdraw her hand. Her voice was the same absolute rationality one would use to discuss experimental data. "There is no point wasting energy on micromanagement. Current physical contact does not impair movement efficiency or analytical thinking." Beneath the ice of her tone, there might have been a hairline tremor. Vic Gray paused, then relaxed, subconsciously tightening his grip a fraction. "All right." He smiled, the tension easing, curiosity threading his voice. "Honestly, holding your hand like this feels kind of weird, but not bad." Wednesday didn't answer. She resumed leading him forward. The fingers hidden in her sleeve curled almost imperceptibly. They crossed the dark, tangled woods behind the academy in silence until they reached the place Xavier's prophetic paintings had hinted at. The mouth of a black cave, smelling of damp earth and something undefinable. A cold breath hissed outward from the entrance. Vic Gray's smile vanished. Alertness took over. He stepped forward and unobtrusively released Wednesday's hand, placing himself between her and the cave. "Stay close." His voice dropped. The light in his eyes that usually danced with madness sharpened into a scanning vigilance. "Let's see what's actually in there." He led, bending to crawl into the black. Wednesday followed, close, watching his back and the still alert Riot on his head. A complex, unreadable glimmer flashed in her dark eyes, and she followed wordlessly into the unknown. The cave's light was dim, dust hung thick, and the air stank faintly of animal residue. Vic Gray snapped on his flashlight. The beam skittered across walls and floor, rusted shackles, deep claw marks gouging stone, and several broken, twisted claws scattered about. "Well, look," he whistled, half amused. "Seems our Mr. Hyde's been a guest here more than once, didn't get the friendliest welcome." He crouched, nostrils flaring as he sampled the scents. "No disinfectant, no cold metal. This isn't the plague doctor's signature." He frowned, trying to parse the smells. "Just Hyde's sweet, delicious stench. And another person's. It's faint, but it's there. Someone else is pulling Hyde's leash." He drew a breath, perplexed. "Strange. I feel like I've smelled that other scent before." Wednesday crouched behind him and, with clinical calm, lifted a broken claw to inspect it under the light. "Bring this back for DNA comparison. There may be a match in missing persons or criminal databases." "Good idea." Vic Gray grinned and picked up a larger claw, weighing it. His eyes gleamed. "Though I think it'd make a fine addition to my private collection. Look at this curve, this edge. Polish it up and set it on a frame or over the dorm fireplace. Perfect." "A creature like a Hyde is rare," he added, gesturing. "Even better if I could get the whole skull to hang up." Wednesday glanced at him. There was no moral rebuke on her pale face. Instead, she gave a nearly imperceptible nod, a rare hint of appreciation. "Excellent aesthetic. It conveys a primitive, immediate deterrent, death." Vic Gray's smile grew wider at the validation. Then, with no warning, his expression froze, as if someone had yanked his attention away. Words irrelevant to the cave slipped out in a swaying tone. "Oh my God, Enid, you look so beautiful in that." Silence fell. Dust motes drifted in the flashlight beam. Wednesday turned toward him, slowly, almost deliberately. Her cold gaze locked onto Vic Gray, like two sheets of ice. He snapped back to himself and flushed, rubbing his nose in embarrassment. Sorry, the speech channel synchronized again. Let me check over there." He closed his eyes and seemed to pull inward, listening to the other side of their shared mind. After a few seconds, he opened his eyes, voice laced with helpless admiration and an unwitting boast. "Oh, Enid and I are picking out dresses for the dance tomorrow. Honestly, that dress is, really, quite beautiful." Wednesday's stare had gone beyond cold. It felt as if icicles were forming where her glance touched. The survival instinct made Vic scramble for cover with a bright, foolish smile. "Hey, Wednesday. Look, there's a dance. We should go too, right? We should buy formal outfits. What do you think?" Wednesday's brow furrowed, as if she'd been asked something outrageous. 57. The allure of a white suit. Vic Gray's survival alarm was screaming in his head. Even with his EQ in the negatives, he could read the murderous intent in Wednesday's eyes, like it had crystallized into icicles. Holding the hand of the Gothic detective while praising the dress of the sweet little wolf girl, this would make even the devils in hell shake their heads. Guilt hit him like a punch. He had to fix this. Now. Immediately. At that moment, Riot's overbearing, tyrannical streak slid through him like a faint electric current. Vic Gray's gaze sharpened. He stepped forward and, without a word, seized Wednesday's wrist just as she tried to yank it free. His smile hardened into something bold and aggressive, as if someone else had taken control. "It's decided then." His voice left no room for argument. Arrogance laced through it. "I haven't seen you in a formal dress yet. I must see it." "Vic, let go." Wednesday's voice was ice, her sharp words meant to arm her. But beneath the cold, there was a thin thread of offended nervousness. She tried again. "No." Vic's grin brightened until it was almost insolent, his stubbornness bordering on madness. I want to see. I want to see right now." He gave her no chance to refuse. With a sudden surge of strength, he pulled her hand and headed for town. "You." Wednesday stumbled from the pull, biting her lower lip, a flicker of annoyance crossing her pale face. She could have broken free in an instant. She knew 100 ways to make a crazed guy drop to the floor. But her eyes fell to their linked hands, then to Vic's rare, unreasonable, yet unexpectedly handsome profile. The icy retort at the tip of her tongue died unspoken. She tilted her head slightly and let him lead her through the dappled forest light, the breeze playing with her black hair. A faint, fleeting blush brushed her cheek, so quick it might have been light at work. But she did not pull away. She allowed the madman to drag her toward town as if being kidnapped. The only formal wear shop in Jericho town smelled of perfume and new fabric, and the air buzzed with the nervous, excited chatter of couples pre-holiday. against the lifeless expressions of the men waiting by the fitting rooms like drained husks. Vic White was an effervescent tablet dropped into warm water, bubbling, vibrant, impossible to ignore. He darted between racks with exaggerated enthusiasm, holding up several dresses of wildly different styles and offering advice to Enid. Mostly, he was guided by the soft suggestions of the pearl-white thing wound around his neck. "This one," Vic declared, waving a shimmering gown. "Enid, this one brings out your eyes." Serum's voice was a whisper. "The pleated hem will make it lively. Oh, and this red one, passionate like fire, just like you." He brandished another dress. Serum murmured, "It suits your hair very well." Enid giggled, basking in the attention. The looks from the other girls, equal parts admiration and envy, made her unconsciously swell with pride. Handsome, considerate, good taste. This was the partner she'd chosen. In an impulsive flourish, Vic White even picked out a pure white suit for himself. When he stepped from the fitting room, the shop went instantly silent. The suit fit him perfectly, outlining a tall, straight figure and stripping away his usual frantic flamboyance. In its place was a rare, quiet elegance and a steady confidence. The slight smile at one corner hinted at something knowing. Serum, pearl white and glossy around his neck, complemented the suit and added a hint of mystery. He'd paired it with a V-neck fitted vest, showing the curve of his collarbone and a small patch of chest, an effortless, lazy sexiness against the suit's formality. "Enid, what do you think?" Vic winked, shattering the momentary solemnity with his familiar smirk. He rubbed his chin theatrically. "Maybe around the neck. Would a choker look better?" That suggestion landed like a spell. Suppressed groans and sharp intakes of breath rippled through the shop. Several girls covered their faces, cheeks flaming, eyes darting as if laughter and fainting were equally likely. Others tilted their necks shyly, as if unconsciously answering the suggestion. Even Serum seemed overwhelmed by the sudden wave of embarrassed excitement. The pearl-white substance shivered, then, whoosh, retracted into Vic's skin at the back of his neck, leaving only a faint, shy warmth. Enid's face went bright red and her heart raced. Fortunately, she had developed a tiny reserve of resistance to Vic's occasional devastating charm. She stomped her foot to try to cool her cheeks and protested, half laughing, half exasperated, "Vic, stop it! This is already perfect. Really, very, very handsome." But her gaze stayed glued to the man in the white suit, the one who just suggested a collar. Seeing the flushed faces around him and Enid's exaggerated reaction, Vic's grin widened with mischievous triumph. He tilted his head back and tapped his now smooth neck, scanning the shop as if genuinely searching for a suitable collar. "Do I really not need one?" he drawled, voice full of innocent temptation. "I think it would go really well with this outfit." "No, you don't!" Enid almost screamed as she lunged forward and clamped a hand over his mouth, afraid he'd say anything else that would make even more people swoon. Her small face was hot enough to fry an egg, eyes a tangled mix of embarrassment, affection, and the sweet trouble of having a beloved who attracted too much attention. Vic could only make muffled noises, his eyes crinkling into delighted crescents at the success of his prank. He took advantage of the moment to loop an arm around Enid's waist and draw her close, lowering his forehead to nuzzle the top of her head as if calming a prickly little animal. The shop erupted in another chorus of suppressed gasps and envious murmurs. Serum, having recovered its composure, oozed a tiny ribbon of pearl white from the back of Vic's neck like a shy decorative collar, vibrating with embarrassment at his earlier suggestion. All right, Vic laughed, lifting his hands in mock surrender. "No collar, then. Serum will do. If Enid says it looks good, then this is the one." He took her hand, turned to the mirror, and rubbed his chin with a satisfied air. "Twin coronation. Vic, you seem different than before." Enid studied Vic, her eyes bright with curiosity and a hint of something like pleasure. "You used to come close only for pranks. Being natural like this, as if being near me is normal, that never happened." Vic White touched the base of his neck on instinct. Serum brushed his fingertips like a shy thing. It clicked for him. "It's Serum," he said. "Different symbiotes affect their hosts differently. Riot pushes dominance and the urge to destroy. And Serum..." He hesitated, a rare flush crossing his face. His voice dropped, softened. "And Serum sharpens elegance, and..." He let the word hang, then finished almost sheepishly, affection. Serum shrank back a fraction, its voice suddenly softer, almost embarrassed. If you don't like this, I can temporarily suppress that part of the emotion amplification. No. Enid shook her head before he could finish. She reached out and took his hand, warm and steady, and an easy, slightly shy smile bloomed across her face. I like this. She liked this Vic. He still had his unpredictable mad charm, but those touches and protective gestures were no longer pranks. They came from somewhere warmer and more genuine. It made her feel safe and, disconcertingly, a little fluttery. Sensing her acceptance, Serum's pearl-white sheen softened. It curled lightly around Vic's neck, as if content. Vic squeezed Enid's hand in return, his fingertips tracing the back of her hand. His eyes, usually wild or playful, now held a tenderness he hadn't noticed before. All right, he said, smiling, less showy and more real. Then, we'll keep it this way. On the other side of town, Vic Gray hauled Wednesday by the wrist all the way to Jericho Town and stopped before an oak door inset with a taxidermied crow. A carved sign read Ullius Emporium. Dear, Vic Gray's voice was theatrical, riot brightening his flamboyance as he pushed the heavy door open. The brass bell gave a dull, funereal jingle. I know your philosophy. Color is sin. Black and white are eternal. That's why I chose this place. Inside was dim light, the dry tang of old paper, herbs, and preservatives. Shelves of specimens, skeletons, and antique garments filled the air with a Gothic hush, like a tomb of art. He led her to the back, where a gown stood on a mannequin as if waiting for centuries, a vintage, dark, formal dress. Layers of black gauze fanned into a cake-like skirt, the bodice a maze of pleats that bloomed like black roses across chest and throat, both corset and decoration. A dark metal belt pinched the waist. It was elegant death-made fabric, sublime and dangerous. Wednesday's attention fixed on the dress. Her eyes swept the details, then flicked to the boy beside her, who wore a smile that managed both mischief and something oddly reverent. How did he understand her aesthetic so precisely? The shopkeeper slid out of the shadows as if she had been part of them. Her voice rasped like silk dragged over stone. Aha, it's you. She regarded Vic. The boy who did community service here last time, with that little golden sun. Eye for things, huh? Looking at the night ravens whisper, are you? Good taste. She tapped a small brass price tag, numbers that would make most people faint. A Victorian heirloom, custom-made for a notorious widow. It has been waiting for a worthy master. Wednesday's expression tightened. She glanced away, ready to refuse. Vic Gray only grinned more arrogantly. He snapped his fingers, then produced stack after stack of thick bills from nowhere, piling them on the glass counter as if cash were meaningless. Money's never the problem, madam. His tone was light and certain. But I also need a suit to match this. Ullius Emporium never disappoints, right? The shopkeeper's eyes gleamed in the dim like a night creature with rare prey. Of course. She pulled a suit from a walnut wardrobe carved with strange symbols. Dark gray British plaid, rounded lapels, a slim, lethal cut, paired with a silk shirt. Understated and aristocratic, perfect for the gown. Vic picked up the dress and offered it to Wednesday with a ridiculous flourish. If you please, my queen. She examined him, then accepted the heavy garment with a stately lift of her chin and disappeared into the fitting room behind black velvet curtains. When she emerged, Vic Gray had already changed. The suit fit him like a second skin. The tailoring cut his broad shoulders and narrow waist into a dangerous silhouette. The silk shirt was an absolute black, catching light with a dark sheen. Riot lent him a tense, tyrannical poise, less jester, more young despot stepping out of the abyss. Wednesday's dress made her look like night come alive. Gauze that flowed like darkness, pleats and frills like thorns and roses wrapping pale skin. The black made her face seem carved from ice, her aura frigid and inarguable. When they saw each other, both were briefly taken aback. The shop's grandfather clock ticked in the suddenly frozen air, as if marking the moment. Then Vic Gray's mouth curved possessively. He stepped forward without a word, and with an almost aggressive intimacy, took Wednesday's gloved hand in one of his and slid the other around the cinched waist of her gown, drawing her well within personal space. He leaned down slightly, dark eyes bright with unabashed admiration, and a hunger that bordered on feral, his voice low and magnetic. Welcome back to your throne, my queen. The gesture was brazen, and the words brazen still. Yet the suit, Riot's amplification, struck a strange, dangerous harmony with Wednesday's imperious cold. He was her blade and scepter. She was his crown and law. Wednesday did not pull away at once. Her lashes fluttered. Her pupils reflected his imposing form. Her face remained an unreadable mask, but the sharp line of her mouth softened just a fraction. She lifted her head as if to accept a coronation that had always been hers. The shop's shadows deepened around them, enclosing the two figures like a portrait in black, the tyrant and his queen. 59. Prelude to the opening of the ball. The dorm smelled of faint perfume, old camphor, and the faint chemical tang of preservatives clinging to Wednesday's gown. Enid's dress was a starry blue gradient that caught the light and shimmered like a sliver of the night sky draped over her. She stared at Wednesday, who stood near a small mirror, adjusting the folds of her black mesh gloves, and let her surprise show, along with a teasing edge. "I really didn't expect you to want to go to the ball," Enid said. "I distinctly remember you calling a ball pointless and stupid collective social entertainment." Wednesday didn't turn. Her voice was steady and dry, slicing the air like a scalpel. "It couldn't be helped. Someone personally invited me." She emphasized personally in a way that left no doubt. Enid crossed her arms and turned her head away, cheeks puffing like a disgruntled squirrel, convinced she had lost the argument. After all, she had been the one who invited Vic first. "Wait." Enid glanced toward the closed bathroom door. "Why hasn't Vic come out yet?" From behind the door came muffled roars, suppressed, furious, like some large beast gnawing at an iron cage. The corner of Wednesday's mouth twitched in something close to pleasure. "To purchase our gowns, Vic fronted a sum in the hundreds of thousands," she said. "A large portion of that came from a certain Symbiote gentleman's private chocolate reserve fund. Now the legal owner of the funds has awakened and is providing some rather intense feedback," she added. "Hundreds of thousands of dollars." Enid's eyes went wide. "What kind of dress is that expensive?" Wednesday turned slightly, letting the layered black gauze of her skirt fall like night mist. She spoke with the casual pride of someone describing an heirloom, a Victorian antique, custom-made for a notorious widow. "That's not fair," Enid protested. The gap between their wardrobes felt enormous. "Do I need to remind you of the appraisal on the tiers of the deep-sea sapphire around your neck?" Wednesday arched an eyebrow and let her dark eyes sweep over the brilliant blue pendant at Enid's throat. Exposed, Enid could not help but smile, stroking the cool gemstone. "Vic said it suits me." Wednesday made no comment, only a faint snort. Enid, still puzzled, wondered where Vic could have gotten so much money. Last week at the Weathervane Cafe, he was moaning that he'd run out of funds for next month's limited edition chocolates. "If you'd been paying attention," Wednesday said coldly, "you'd see that at least 70% of the Academy has bought special equipment from Vic." "Bought?" Enid sounded incredulous. "What does he sell? Handmade cookies?" "No." Wednesday's tone was flat, as if listing a menu. Glock 17s, 9mm parabellum rounds, standard extended magazines. Optional color schemes include but are not limited to cherry blossom pink, Tiffany blue, and neon green. Enid's jaw nearly dropped. "He's selling guns at school? Even the headmistress bought one?" "She did," Wednesday said. "Pearl white with gold trim, paid in cash. She keeps it in her desk to soothe her emotions," she added, the quotation marks sharp. Enid blinked. "She thinks the best way to keep students safe is to give them something that scares others into being polite." A small, pleased curve touched Wednesday's mouth. "And Vic's after-sales service is thorough. Free modifications, ammunition replenishment, and, if needed, practical application guidance." "My God," Enid muttered, stunned. "Did I just find an arms dealer for a boyfriend?" The bathroom door clicked open. Two Vics emerged at once, clutching their heads, faces dazed from having been scolded until the color drained from them. When Venom went into a rage, the vocabulary and the sting of it were something else entirely, an onslaught to both body and spirit. "Vic, are you okay?" Enid hurried forward. Vic White, serum, rubbed his temples. "I'm fine, actually." Vic Gray, Riot, added gloomily. But Venom couldn't take the shock and fainted from anger again. They both exhaled in perfect synchronized relief. "Thank God it fainted," they said, the same breath in the same cadence. From outside came the distant murmur of the ball, lights and music like the pull of a tide. Vic White straightened his crisp collar with the practiced precision of someone whose every movement was measured by habit or enhancement. Vic Gray, impatient and restless, hooked a finger into the collar of his British plaid jacket and tugged to relieve the sense of constraint Riot found intolerable. The silk of his shirt shifted, exposing a hint of collarbone. The motion made him look a little wild. Their eyes met, and in the silent place between them a shared impulse formed. They turned and reached for the two girls. Vic Gray's hand closed toward Wednesday first, commanding and sure. He gave a slight nod and offered a defiant, magnetic curl to his mouth. "My esteemed queen." Vic White's reached for Enid with soft, steady assurance, his smile warm in his eyes. "My lovely princess." For a beat, their voices overlapped, two tones perfectly in sync, the slightly mad joy of two minds aligned. "Let's dazzle the room and let the ball burn." Wednesday regarded Vic Gray's outstretched hand without immediate reply. Her gaze flicked across his loosened collar to the anticipation in his eyes. Slowly, deliberately, she slid her gloved hand into his. No overt emotion crossed her face, only a faint, almost satisfied twist at one corner of her mouth that was gone before anyone could note it. Enid's hand went into Vic White's the instant he finished speaking. A shy, radiant smile lit her face, and her starry skirt rippled as she moved. "Let's go," she said, all excitement. Wednesday only tilted her chin slightly, and the two Vics returned their respective smiles, one warm and sincere, the other bold and possessive. Together, then, they led their partners into the shifting lights and shadow of the dance floor, stepping out to meet whatever the night had in store. 60. Monsters Unleashed. The ballroom at Nevermore Academy had never seen anything like it. When two pairs, strikingly different but eerily in sync, stepped onto the floor, the raucous music seemed to falter. The spotlight, as if it had a will of its own, followed the two figures who shared the same face. Vic Gray and Wednesday entered like a dark monarch, and his queen from legend. His plaid suit could barely contain Riot's restless dominance. His hand at her waist was a claim. Wednesday, in whispers of the night raven, her pale face a frozen rose against the black, accepted his lead and the surrounding looks of awe and fear as if acknowledging a rightful submission. On the other side, Vic White and Enid were like twin stars cutting through the night. His white suit shimmered in the pearlescent glow of serum, every movement guiding Enid's spins with gentle care. Enid's starry blue gown swirled, her eyes overflowed with joy as if he were her perfect knight. "Wow," she whispered as Vic White spun her. "Aren't we a bit eye-catching?" Vic White chuckled softly. "Just standard procedure." Vic Gray led Wednesday through a forceful dip. The faint crack of his joints was almost audible. He lowered his head, warm breath at her ear, Riot's pride clear in his tone. "Look, they're watching us. They all know you belong to." Wednesday's fingers pinched the soft inside of his arm hard enough to turn his next words into a stifled gasp. Her voice, icy and low, was only for him. "Shut up and dance. Your arrogance is grating on my eyes." He winced, then let out a low chuckle and tightened his arm. The music rose to a crescendo. Vic White and Enid's dance flowed like a dream. Serum's gentle light lent everything a soft filter. Enid's skirt scattered tiny stars with each turn. Her laughter chimed against Vic White's heart. Serum pulsed faintly at his neck, a silent concord of joy. "This is your light that guides me, my princess," he murmured, leading her into a perfect dip. Across the floor, Vic Gray and Wednesday's dance was a quiet, physical contest, taming and testing. Riot made his lead unquestionably dominant, wide, aggressive steps. Wednesday's dark gown billowed like night fog as she matched him perfectly, sometimes countering with subtle resistance. Her cold gaze said plainly, "I allow you to lead, not control." "This music is as limp as a lullaby," Vic Gray grumbled, spinning her so sharply she almost flew free before yanking her back and forcing her to his chest. "Let's get some real rhythm." Riot, restless gray-black matter atop his head, twitched and hummed like a war drum. Wednesday's brow tightened almost imperceptibly, but she didn't object. Her adaptability made them sharper, more combative, a Gothic tension out of step with the surrounding waltz, but fierce and magnetic enough to draw every daring stare. In the shadows at the edge of the floor, Headmistress Larissa Weems leaned against a pillar, an icy blue drink in hand. Her gaze swept the swaying crowd and settled on the two conspicuous, stylistically different pairs at the center. A faint smile, equal parts indulgence and resignation, curved her lips as she swirled her glass. "Ah, youth," she murmured. She had wondered what fuss her uniquely mad nephew would cause with his choice of partner. Gothic Wednesday Addams, whose danger matched his own, or sunny little wolf girl Enid Sinclair, who might offer him warmth. She had prepared contingency plans for every outcome. Turns out, she had been wrong about both. She laughed softly, shaking her head. He had solved the dilemma the most Victor Black way possible. She sipped, then, with a slightly more serious look, let her eyes slide to the two Vics, making exaggerated synchronized faces. The worry at the edge of her smile hardened. "I hope this is temporary," she thought. One Victor Black was already enough to blow Nevermore's security budget, threaten my hairline, and fill tea time with reports of explosions and missing cafeteria chocolate. Two. She didn't finish the thought. She tipped the glass back and drained it, as if the drink could dull the vision of what two Victor Blacks might do to the school. A soft drip sound, so faint it was almost lost under the music. A bead of thick crimson landed on Larissa's expensive white velvet shoulder, a glaring stain. She froze, then looked down. The stem of her glass cracked with a brittle sound. On the dance floor, both Vics, mid-synchronized flourish, froze. Without a look exchanged, each moved with razor precision. Vic White tugged off his white jacket in a single sweep. The soft fabric billowed and, in an instant, covered Enid's head and shoulders like a cloud, hiding her stunned expression. Vic Gray's motion was rougher. He tore the shoulder of his plaid jacket and threw it, Riot's residual heat and restless aura clinging to it, over Wednesday from head to toe like a banner. Then, hiss! A screaming, mechanical sound cut through the music. The ceiling sprinklers snapped open, not with water, but with a wild, indiscriminate torrent of thick, glaring crimson liquid, like a downpour of blood. The glittering dance floor became a disaster zone in seconds. Screams, curses, and the crash of overturned tables drowned out the orchestra. Guests in finery scrambled. Gowns and hairdos were smeared, ruined in an instant. "My dress! What is this? Is that blood?" Headmistress Larissa stood her ground as the crimson streamed down her hair and cheeks. Her gown was ruined, her manicured fingers curled into tight, trembling fists. The air around her chilled with her anger. Under the jackets that had been tossed over them, Wednesday calmly extended a black mesh-gloved hand and caught a few falling drops. She lifted her wrist, flicked out her tongue, and tasted the liquid. A rare flash of offended irritation crossed her normally impassive face as she pulled the plaid jacket off her head, letting the red slide down her pale cheeks. "Red paint," she said, voice cold enough to cut through the spraying red. "These pranking bastards," she added, contempt in every syllable. "Couldn't even be bothered with decent pig's blood." Enid, more tentative, peeled the white jacket off. Her golden hair and starry gown were sticky with the red goop. She looked around at the chaos and at her ruined dress, her eyes reddened. How could they? This dance. The night she'd been waiting for, the dance with the boy she liked, lay ruined. They ruined it. From his neck came a soft but dangerous voice. It was Serum, no longer placid, it seethed with cold fury. "I want to cut something now." Riot answered in a hoarse, savage rasp. The gray-black symbiote writhed, spikes surged. "Find them." Serum's voice remained deceptively gentle, but its resolve was iron. "Make them pay." Riot completed the thought with a roar of destructive hunger. Then black, viscous symbiote matter, thick as boiling tar, erupted from both Vix's bodies. The pearlescent scarf and restless gray crown were gone. The symbiotes exploded into complete coverage, fusing with muscle and bone. Their frames swelled, fanged maws unhinged, massive white eyes flared alive in the red-lit fog of the room. Two colossal, grotesque creatures tore free in the center of the chaotic ballroom and threw back their heads in simultaneous inhuman roars. Roar! Roar! Monsters were unleashed. Headmistress Larissa watched the two shadowy titans, and after a beat in which her anger paused at the sight, allowed a thin, cold smile. "Those bastards do deserve a lesson," she murmured. Nevermore's motto came to mind as if recited to steel herself. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, no matter how cheap the red paint.